Hey everybody, welcome to episode 30 of the Reptile Rejects podcast. Tonight, me and Dom are talking with Ron St Pierre of Fairy Tale Dragons. And how are you guys doing this evening?
Well, I'm very good. I'm very excited to have Ron. I mean, it's one of the OG, one of the persons I've been wanting to have on for a really, really long time, even though I've never actually spoken to Ron before tonight. So I'm pretty happy about it. I think it'll be an amazing show. And Ron, a huge thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, we just I just got back from a reptile show, so I'm kind of dragging right now, but I'll wake up.
Which show was that?
The Orlando Repticon. It's just like a mid-sized reptile show. It's one of the larger Repticons in Florida, but it's one that these days the only Repticons we do now are the ones that are like within 20 minutes from the house, 30 minutes from the house. There's just so many of them. And so we live in Orlando, so it was an easy one. But today was like a crazy day. In the middle of the show, we had four severe weather warnings, and I went outside and it looked like there was a hurricane at the venue. And then I was thinking, oh man, it's ripping all the plastic off of all our enclosures. And my neighbor is actually a pretty famous turtle breeder named Dennis Uhrig, and it was just a weird coincidence that we ended up next door to him. So I've got an exotic turtle farm next door, and then there's us. So I called Dennis and I'm like, "Hey man, what's the weather like over there?" And he was like, "Oh man, the temperature dropped 15 degrees, and it's like a hurricane. The wind is like 45 miles an hour." And so while I was at the show, he came over here and secured all the plastic for us and stuff. So it's pretty cool. I'm actually lucky in that regard that I had that dude like right there. So
That's pretty
and he
cool.
understands the whole thing. He everything he does is outdoors, so he understands all the dynamics involved with this. So, but there's
Have,
like
have,
400 blue tongues out there. So,
have you been tempted to jump into turtles and tortoises and stuff? Or
uh,
is that kind of nice to walk over there once a week kind of thing and get your experience that way?
no, I mean, in the past, I've kept a lot of tortoises. Like actually, in 2013, I was building a pretty large tortoise setup. I had like 40 Emmys, the mountain tortoises. Um, and then I was buying leopards and just I had a ton, man. I don't even know how many, but that was going to be my future going forward. I had 10 acres and it was in like prime tortoise habitat. It was dry and uh, plenty of grass and all that stuff. And I was doing that, and then I ended up getting a divorce in 2016, and then I was like, I gave her the house and stuff, and I basically had to start over. So I was like, yeah, just sell the tortoises, and it may be something I revisit down the road. I kind of didn't expect to end up in this blue tongue thing, which we've got about. I mean, we probably legitimately have 20 years worth of projects to mine here just with what we have now. We have 10 blue tongue mutations, and we last year Heather made the double hets for a couple of different combos that are breeding right now. So this year we'll actually start producing combos of stuff, and we'll be able to roll out maybe five of the morphs to the public this year, maybe six, depending. Um, so, but I mean, when you look at that, just making two and three gene combos, it could take 10 years on a lot of that stuff. So we've got a ton of work to do there, and there's only two of us. We have no employees, so that ends up um, that's going to be a quite a time sink, especially as she continues to grow it and add. I mean, 10 morphs on their own. If you have, you know, 10 specimens per project, there's 100 skinks right there. So it
Oh yeah.
it tracks up quick.
So I was going to ask, volume wise, obviously, how many animals? Let's just stick to just blue tongues right now. If you're looking at 10 different morphs, how many animals do you have? How many cages? How many animals per cages? Like, how much of your backyard are just the skinks taken?
We're on 5 acres. Uh, I think the last time I asked her, I think she said we had 350-ish blue tongues total at the moment. There's 140 outdoor units, 130, something like that. that are just dedicated to blue tongues. Then there's like 20 units that are dedicated to bearded dragons. Um, and then I have odds and ends stuff. I have, the Tokay Gecko project that I'm messing around with. I have White's tree frogs that I mess around with. I just have I kind of I mean the blue tongues is really Heather's thing, but so I do like the all the outdoor systems and all that, but she does all the breeding and the husbandry and she really I was able to acquire most of those blue tongues from various people that had bought them 10 years ago when they were coming in out of Hong Kong, and then nobody did anything with a lot of them. Like a lot of those morphs have been sitting here forever. So different people that I knew had them, and then one guy started to really collect them all. And then he was like, one day he called me up and he said, "Hey, look, I've had these things. They're not doing anything. You guys want to take these and just give me half the babies back?" So he ended up giving me, the hypermels and albinos and um, the these things that we call the toffee, and then there were other ones that we picked up. I can't remember everything that he gave us at the time, but it was basically a huge jump forward. And within 2 years, we had him breeding and no issues. But we keep everything outdoors, and it's in big enclosures. And my climate is somewhat similar to where most of them come from in Australia. So, um, but obviously, you have days like today where the weather's completely insane, and it was 71 degrees Fahrenheit this afternoon, and tonight it's going to be below freezing. So we're rubber banding all over the place, and all the water that was dumped this afternoon from the rain that when it was 71 in the morning will be giant frozen discs on top of every enclosure. So it's just
How
nuts.
do you have the enclosures for, say, the bearded dragons and blue tongue set up so that they can handle the when it gets below freezing at night?
So everything is covered in 6 mil clear plastic that we basically vent or cover as the temperatures need. You got to remember one thing about where we live, and it's what actually I hear a lot. People are like, "Oh, you keep everything outside. It's so easy." Actually, no, it's way more complicated and way more difficult because you have to react to all the weather conditions. Like you can't just put them out there. It's just not, it just doesn't work that way. Because when you confine animals to any sort of enclosure, no matter how big it is, you're still responsible for controlling that. And they don't have all the options that they would if they had no barriers. So, um, one of the things like this time of year, we can have days where it's 85 degrees and blasting sun. And man, you better have that plastic backed way off during that. But then like 2 days later, it can be 40 degrees. It can be below, we can get down in the 20s, and then it shoots back up the next day and it's just all over. So it's a constant management. And then the blue tongues all get a thick layer of hay in the bottom, and they basically build all these burrows down in the hay. So they go under there at night. We don't use any electricity to heat anything. It's all done via either underground that they go into by themselves, or and in conjunction with the plastic that keeps wind chill off them, keeps freezing rain off of them. Um, and the plastic is really the control mechanism. It's how much we vent, how much we cover, is how we control it.
And just by curiosity, what are you using around for the surrounding of cage? Are you using 2x4s? Are you using pressure treated wood? Are you using metal baskets?
I
How do you
actually
keep
have,
the animals in there?
so I actually use I probably got, I don't know, man. There's probably 8 different systems that I've built over the last 6 or 8 years since we've been in this house. Some of them are they're not 2x4s, but they're 1x6s. So they're pressure treated and they're like 16 feet long. So we'll take those and I'll stack them. I'll attach them so they're like 4 high. So it's 24-inch tall enclosure. Um, and then I'll build wire tops and obviously put wire on the bottom. And then that's probably the most common thing. But I also bought 50 of these aquaculture tubs that are like, I think they're 5 feet by 3 feet, and they're 16 inches tall, deep, whatever. and I rip the bottoms out of those and attach wire on the majority of the bottoms so that if it rains, it just goes right out. And then we sink them down in the ground a little bit, and then backfill them with a layer of dirt, and then a thick layer of hay, and a CBS block so they can file their own nails down walking on that, and also it gives them a basking area that's a little separate. And yeah, I mean, dude, there's so many different, and I built some aluminum enclosures, so I messed around with that a little bit. Um, yeah, I'm never happy with the system, so I'm always changing it, and then I'm always looking for a better way, even though probably it's most likely a waste of time. And the wood cages are, realistically, the wood is probably the best as far as the easiest to manage, but there's all these issues with that. It tends to rot over time. It'll, with the rubber banding of hot and cold, wet and dry, the screws start to pop out, so you have to constantly be monitoring those. Whereas the tub system, that's all PVC and aluminum, and once it's set up, it's pretty much nothing really to do. Those tubs last forever, even out in the sun. And obviously aluminum is pretty good if you get a good grade aluminum beams. So, yeah, man, it's a bunch of different systems. They all have pros and cons, and we're constantly reevaluating. We run into an issue, which we have off and on, then I'll readjust them. But it's pretty dialed in. I mean, as far as the blue tongues go, they're pretty much, now I feel like we've pretty much tackled everything, and we kind of have it all figured out. Um, the only recent issue that we ran into was we had a run of where the humidity was too high, and while blue tongues can take high humidity, they do not like excessive wet. So I had to make some changes to make sure they always had like very dry areas in their enclosure at all times.
Was
So
that
that
more
would
with the like your westerns, Centralians, and Northerns that didn't like it, and the
actually it
in
was
IJ stuff was a little better, or it was just straight across?
um I don't think we had any of that with the IJ stuff. I think it was all the Western. Actually, the Westerns, I only have a pair of those, and I've never had an issue with them. But the Centra, the what do you call it? The Northerns and the Easterns, yeah. That we basically, last year we had a weird winter. Like, it was very strange, and to mitigate it, I thought, okay, I'm gonna take mulch bags and I'm gonna cut a hole in them so they can go in the mulch bags, and the mulch, as it decomposes, gives off heat. So it was kind of like a giant heat pack they could crawl into, and it worked really good in the winter. Like, it got them through the winter flawlessly. But as soon as spring came, uh, it started to rain a lot, and the mulch bags were holding the condensation in there, and the skinks like to be in the mulch bags. And so we started running into some issues we started seeing some problems with their skin. So as soon as we saw that, we had to remove, and it was like 200 mulch bags, man. It sucked to take out. And a lot of them were full of giant, by now they've been in the enclosures for almost a year. They were full of giant carpenter ants. And man, you'd grab a bag to pull it out, and you'd be covered in these 1-inch ants that were biting the hell out of you. It sucked. But I knocked it out. Her and I knocked it out in like an afternoon. But yeah, and as soon as I got them out, I went back to the hay, and they burrow in that stays nice and dry. The hay really is the kind of the perfect substrate for them, as long as it's deep enough.
Did you want to go through with kind of what you're working with in terms of species, and maybe some of the projects you're working with in blue tongues kind of thing? Running through because I know you guys have some hybrid stuff going on, but then you got your pure stuff, and then obviously you got like westerns and that as well.
Yeah, we haven't done any actual hybrids. Everything we have is either subspecies. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you view it, but as of this moment, they're considered subspecies, the Easterns and the Northerns, and that's the only two that. Actually, no, I take that back, because we have used the Skincordies from Irian Jaya, or whatever they're classified as now. We did bake those into some of the projects, Um, so yeah, we've got like 10 mutations, 10 morphs. All of them, I think, have been proven now. I think she proved them all out within the last year or two. Um, and we already started making double hits. So we'll actually should make combos this year of different things. But we've got an IJ morph of what appears to be a T positive albino, but it's got a dual range of expression. You get dark ones and light ones, and the dark ones are purplish and almost look like they're black when they're born, but it fades out. It becomes this kind of like lavender color. And then the typical looking T positives are like orange with, and none of them have any black when they're adults. It's a strange morph, and it's a simple recessive. So last year she baked those into like the toffees to make patternless versions of these. And we both think, and I think she's right. I think that the toffee of this thing, this T positive that she calls it, we call them bubble gums because we weren't really sure what they were, but they were different. Um, I think that's going to end up being a radical looking mutation because maybe it might end up producing a solid purple skink with no bars. So that would be cool. When I say purple, I mean legit purple, not like, oh, it's kind of purple. Um, so hopefully, but we'll see. I mean, it could be a bust. We just don't know. This year, hopefully, she'll actually get at least one of those on the ground. And then we have the hypermels, the solid black ones. We have aneries.
Because those hypermels, do they have some sort of like thing where the males don't like to breed or something? Because I know Don up here is working with those, but he's not. I don't think he's been too successful, or maybe he had to cross them into northerns to actually get them to kind of
I,
go. But I
I
haven't heard
mean,
him talk about them in a long time.
yeah. I mean, we haven't had. So we only have one hypermel, and then we have a few het hypermels. So what we've got basically right now are like pos het hypermels that we produced from the hets, breeding the hets to like normal stuff to outcross it. Because a lot of that original Australian or whatever, wherever the hell they came from, like I said, they came into the U.S. legally out of Hong Kong 10 years ago, and they've been kicking around the U.S. the whole time. So um, they were just kind of wonky. So the albinos were like that too, but we outcrossed them to northerns, and we ended up with these super strong hets. And this was our second year producing albinos, and we were the first ones to do it in the United States. So they sat around for a long time, but everybody was so concerned about breeding only easterns to easterns, and the eastern gene pool in the United States is very small. It's super inbred. I mean, it's old as hell. So I'm just like, why bother when you can just do the subspecies? That we have carpet pythons that are done that way. We have boa constrictors that are done that way. And when you're looking at like
Bearded dragons too, right? Bearded
bearded
dragons are like
oh
three
dude,
species put together.
bearded dragon, man, I could tell you stories about that. We were doing them in the 90s, man. I was producing, I don't several thousand of each species of the Rankins, the Barbata, and the Viticeps. And pet stores would order, 100 lots of bearded dragons, and you would just send them whatever, and they were totally happy with that. Sometimes those shipments would be, 50 Viticeps and 25 Barbata and 25 Rankins. And people, they knew what they were. I mean, we would tell them what they were, but I don't think most of those stores cared. And I think they just went into tanks and pet stores as bearded dragons because you see the representation in the Viticeps today, at least in the U.S., because you'll suddenly start seeing these rounded head Viticeps popping out of your stuff, and I think that's latent. You know, they used to call them Viticans at the time, which were Rankin's Viticeps crosses, and it was a common thing that people were doing. So yeah, I mean, I think if they actually ever did the blood work on the modern bearded dragon, I think they'd be shocked to find that it's pretty much three different species homogenized into this thing. But with the blue tongues, we're not even doing that. These are we're only doing the subspecies. We have Marukis and we have IJs and we have Gigas. I guess it's
Tannin
Gigas.
bars.
No, I don't have any of those
No.
yet.
Okay.
No, I haven't picked up. She's not really a fan of a lot of the Indo stuff because it's like flighty and aggressive and But eventually I mean, I feel like we probably should have every available
Because
species.
there's lots of exantics I think going around in those too. I think one
Yeah,
of our buddies does imports and stuff, and I think I saw one actually. He got a box and kind of at the same time as a reptile show, so he happened because the show was right by the airport, and like the Friday he opened it up, and yeah, there's exantic, tannin bars and stuff like that straight from Indo that you could add straight to your kind of collection kind of thing, which is interesting to see, right? You think that's kind of as an outsider, you think that's a little harder to come by when oh no, like half of them are exantic, right? Like oh yeah, it's just like with the scrub pythons, right? Half the scrub pythons, I believe,
yeah,
in tannin bar are patternless exantic as well, which
yeah. I
is kind
mean,
of fascinating how that goes across.
aneries and axanthics come in all the time. Back when I used to go through thousands and thousands of reptiles in reptile shipments and pull out odd stuff, that was the most common morph that you found. And it's probably because it's the one that's least likely to get spotted by a predator and picked off, so they're collected more often, and they carry the animals that are carrying the genes because the animals live long enough to spread it, their genes. I mean, I don't know exactly what the reasoning is, but axanthics and aneries are relatively common as far as import wild caught mutations. Like albinos are pretty rare, but I don't think they're that rare in nature. I think that I mean obviously they're all rare to a degree, but I think those are picked off super quick because every year here in Florida they catch more albino nightingales, and I mean every year they catch and in different places and that's just some by sheer luck that some random hunter that does this for a living happens to be driving by a tree at exactly the right time and finds an albino knoll. And the fact that they find them every year and they're spread out. They've been collected as much as like 80 miles apart. So that's not the same thing going on there. And they're just, ever since I started, I got the first ones that actually anybody did anything were the ones that I got from that hunter in 2013. And then I think once I really kind of made that public, then people start, they knew what to look for and they started actually looking for them. And ever since then, and it was driving me nuts because I was trying to have I wanted to have control over that project for a while, and every year they kept catching more, and I had to keep buying them. So at one point I was like, I just can't do this anymore. You just sell them to whoever else wants them because when it was just two, it was cool, but when it was they were up to like 6 or 10, and the price kept going up because they knew that people were interested in them. So I was like, yeah, I'm out on that. And apparently they just caught some a couple months ago, some more. So 10, 12 years. Um, so I just don't think that those morphs are that uncommon. And when I used to go through ball python shipments in the 90s, I mean, every 2,000, 3,000 ball pythons that these guys brought in, I would always get 20, 30, 40 oddballs out of every shipment. And then I was selling them to, people like Kevin McCurley at Nerd and Brian Sharp and all those guys. So they're out there. Nature produces them. It's not that uncommon. It's just I think they just get picked off, or we just don't find them. I mean, what are the chances? Like needles in haystacks and stuff like that. So
Yeah, or you get lucky like Don Patterson and you pop out a
I
couple
saw that.
hypos and an exantic western in a
I saw
clutch.
that. Yeah, yeah. Heather came in. She's like, "Look what Patterson hatched out." Showed me that it came out of a Western. I'm like, man, that's a lucky son of a bitch right there. That's pretty damn cool. That's a beautiful animal. Westerns by
Oh yeah.
themselves are amazing. They're the one blue tongue that I wanted to work with, so that we have a pair. They're pretty hard to get here in the U.S. Um, so yeah, I mean, what are the odds, man?
Oh
But I
yeah.
had albino blue tegus that way. There were only 5 blue tegus brought in, and I bought them and I bred them. And then when I finally started breeding the siblings back together to try to make them bluer, I popped out albinos. And I'll never forget that. I was on the phone with Alan Rapashi the day the first one popped out, and I was like, "Dude, you're not going to believe this. I'm looking at a pink eye and a tegu thing." And he was like, "Oh, you're full of shit, man. There's no way." and we didn't have cell phone. There was no instant travel with as far as being able to share pictures. So I was like, all right, man. I took photos of it. I went to the 1 hour processing thing. I mailed them to him. I was like, dude, you gotta. And I overnighted those pictures to him because I was like, I can't believe this. And then 3 more came out of that clutch, and it was just this total fluke, man. So it happens.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's pretty neat. That I think that also kind of shows maybe how like small the gene pool is, probably with westerns, or maybe somebody was breeding them in Hong Kong before Don got them, kind of thing, or however he got his
Yeah.
through Europe or Asia. They maybe there was a morph kind of involved already, or maybe right, like maybe the gene pool is just that small that it kind of let
I
that
don't
pop
think I've
out.
ever seen that down in Australia, the morph of those.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that if anybody's actually even had morphs there, but I'm not sure how popular westerns are to keep in Australia.
Yeah. I can't, I mean, like, I follow a couple of the skink guys, the big skink guys, Joe Ball and Roger Kramer and a couple of the other ones. But no, I don't think anybody down there has those. I would think if they did have them, Joe Ball would have them. So Don's probably the first person to see that. Which, like I said, my experience has been I don't think the morphs like that are that uncommon. I think it's, just I think it's just a matter of being lucky and finding them and think about it, we really don't produce that much in captivity. Then there's this weird phenomenon where after we've been producing something for so long, like you go like decades where you don't see any morphs, and then all of a sudden a species that's heavily propagated, after decades of propagation, all of a sudden they find one morph, and that immediately within a year or two starts chaining into all these other ones. And then before you know it, you've got 20 or 30 things. Now, is that because people are looking at everything with a fine tooth comb now and finding that one scale that kind of belies the fact that it's holding, some mutation? Or is there some sort of a genetic critical mass that's reached with captive populations where you've got so much, you know, inbreeding going on that you're now forcing you're lining up the right stuff to force the mutations to pop out.
As I
But
say, I think that depends on whether that species is being still imported or not. Because if you take a look at some of the Australian animals, you very rarely hear of Australian animals being bred a long time, then all of a sudden all these morphs pop out, right? But if
yeah,
it's an animal that's still being brought in, like example, when ball pythons started being popular, everybody brought everything in, and then the morph went absolutely nuts. But I find you don't find that with the countries that are cut off. Like I know bearded dragons started getting popular, and there's been more and more, but there's also like how many bearded dragons are being popped out at any given time, right? That's a
yeah,
sheer numbers game. If you took any Morelia or all those, there's only a few morphs. There's not that many, and people have been breeding them forever, but there's not the ridiculous amount of numbers that are producing all those statistical odds that eventually they'll come out.
that's a
So
good
with blue
point.
tongues, how many babies are you popping out of blue tongues? 7, 8? What's the
Yeah,
number?
yeah, it's
So,
between 9 and 12 is the average.
so
So
I
we've had
mean, yeah.
oh
Sorry, I
go
was just gonna say like it's a numbers game. If you guys keep increasing, statistically speaking, eventually you will. You'll pop out
yeah,
random mutations for sure.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That was our main reason, though. It wasn't for that specific reason, but our main reason to plug the IJ skincoides into the rest the morph thing. So basically, the morphs that we're working on are a conglomeration of the three skincoides animals that are available. The intermedias, the easterns, and the IJs. Which I mean, I don't really know what they classify the IJs. They're kind of an unclassified thing at the moment, I guess. Um, but with the IJs, we can still import those, so we can still get new mutations that way. Like the one we got 2 years ago, the bubblegums. Those were imports from Mike Burrer at Snakes and Sunset brought them in, and then they sat at his place for about a year. He tried to sell them to us a couple of times. I was like, no, man, I don't really want to. Not really interested. Then finally one day we were down there dropping off something, and he showed them to us, and now they're adults. And I was like, those are pretty cool. So we ended up taking them, and they happened to be a pair, and she bred them like within a few months of us getting them, and 100% of the babies were copies of the adults. So, and then we weren't sure, is that recessive? Is it a codom? Did we get incomplete dominant? Did we just get lucky? So last year she outcrossed them to new morphs, different like toffees, and I think she did them to hypermels or albinos. I can't remember. Like I said, we have so much crap here, and that's like her baby, and I really don't directly, unless she says, hey, the fifth cage in row 4 has an issue, then I'll go out there and do that. But other than that, I stay out of her way. It's a case of not having too many cooks in the kitchen and all that. And she's way better at picking, what to breed, and because she thinks about it in a different way. And I was never good at that. I'm good at doing species stuff and systems for doing it, like outdoors and stuff like that. But when it comes to like all the genetics and all that, and then tracking all the hats, and I'm just like, whatever. But she's like on the ball.
Oh yeah,
That's
because she, like you said, she also has like freaking 20 cages of bearded dragons to keep on top of as well. So that's pretty cool that she's able to keep on top of that. We're gonna have to have Heather on just on her own, just because I really want to hear her nutrition talk on how she does that. Because I like hearing how she like doesn't just buy the cat food or dog food to feed the blue tongue. No. She's actually going prepping it herself and really coming up with a good system of being on top of the nutrition of the animals.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot, which is one of the things I always did too. I mean, what she does, like I said, way beyond anything I ever did. But one of the things I always looked at feeding reptiles as a seasonal game, not a specific diet all the time. At least for the lizards, the omnivorous stuff, and because those animals are not eating the same thing all year. They're getting like when let's just say giant caterpillars are abundant, then they just eat nothing but those for a couple weeks to maybe a month out of the year. And then when those are gone, they move on to something else. And there's probably scarcity times in the interim where there's not like, specific food items. And then, so they're just kind of eating a small variety of whatever they can find. But nothing has access to the same thing all the time, or at least most things don't. So I always kind of ran that way. And since I mostly did lizards, and most lizards are, either insectivorous or omnivorous, and both of those, insects and like fruit availability and stuff, all that is seasonal. You don't have the same insects all year for the most part. So we always did that. And she does that with the blue tongues, but she does it on a level that I never thought was possible. And then she makes this crazy concoction that's kind of like the base food. And it's got dried mealworms in it. It's got expensive ass cat food in it. It's got different fruits. And then she also uses like, she'll also use dog food because it has lower protein than the cat food. And I don't know, eggs, big carton, big things of eggs all the time. And so she does all that. And that's an enormous job. Like when she does blue tongue day like that, it takes her all day to get them all fed. Like it's impressive. But yeah, she'd be the one, man. If you want to talk about stuff like that, get her on here. She can really go at it.
I have one more blue tongue question with the. So do you guys work with any of the Swedish line sunset stuff that Patterson brought over, or is that not really down with you guys?
No, I mean it's probably something eventually she'll add. Right now, we've just been working pretty much on getting the mutations out, and we're trying to get as many into the public as possible to have the foundation laid. And then after that, she'll go back and start like working on like adding line bred traits like that, amplifying, making things. I mean, she's done a little bit of that already. We bought some of the pitch black animals from Frank Payne, which basically it's an IMG gene. Like they start out a little darker than normal, but some of them turn almost all black as adults. I'm not even really exactly sure how that's carried. I mean, that's we were told it was just a line bred trait, but I'm not really so sure. It's different, and it radically affects the albino. Like she has this one albino she calls Koi, and that's what that is. It's a pitch black albino. Man, that thing it glows. It's a lot of red on it. It's like legit bright red, and it's got like very contrasty with the white. I mean, it's a lot of the albinos end up like kind of yellowish, kind of like albino boa constrictors. But the ones that have the pitch black in them, man, those things are nuts, and they're variable. So you get a wide range. She's and then the Swedish line. Sorry, my bulldog is
All
uncooperative.
good.
Um, she she's looking at those Swedish line animals because Tiki has those, and they buy stuff from us back. We buy and sell stuff to each other, and so I know those two were talking about eventually, or she was talking about getting them. Like I said, man, I don't know exactly what's going on with the blue tongues. Every once in a while, I'll hit her up and like, what is this? Or I'll be out there walking around the yard, and I kid you not, I'll see a blue tongue, and I'm like, where the hell did this thing come from? It's amazing. She's like, well, I showed you that 6 months ago, and I was like, well, whatever. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff. So it's the primary thing that we currently do. I'm still licking my wounds after the emerald thing. So
So, well, perfect you bringing that up. I was actually going to ask. So I'd be more curious to know what the projects are that you're really entwined into. And then, of course, I'd love to get into the emeralds just because, like everybody, we have a lot of success. We have some failures. My life is filled with failures when it comes to reptiles and many successes too. And I know you have had incredible success with a lot of various animals moving from just about every genre of reptiles out there. So, if you want to talk about maybe the different projects that you're mainly into, and then we'll definitely get into the emeralds because I think that's one of the big things that we're very interested in.
okay, well, at the moment, like I said, I'm still kind of licking my wounds from the emerald debacle, but I have been. I kind of took a few months off. Like I was just like, yeah, I just don't want to deal with anything right now other than the stuff that she's working on. And I recently started to kind of build back up again. So I'm basically at the moment I've got these 40 tanks I had built for giant anoles and then I sold the giant anole thing to do the emerald thing. Like I sold that was 13 years of work building up that crown giant collection, and then I sold it all to one guy and then took all that money and threw it into that emerald thing, and then that emerald thing basically kind of crashed and burned and took me out. And so I have all these tanks and this equipment, and these are really nice tanks that I had custom built. And I tried to sell them a couple times, and the deals kept falling through. I wanted to sell them all 40 of them. I mean, I understand it was an entire U-Haul. These are like big tanks. But the deals kept falling through. So at that point, I'm like, started to look at them, and I'm like, what can I do in this that would be cool? That there's really not a lot of, but there's a demand. And back in the 90s, for a long time, for about 10 years in the 90s, I bred a lot of tokay geckos. It's just an animal I always liked. They're nasty bulldog, things. They're fun. You could set them up in big tanks in pairs, and if you have it set up right, you just basically feed them, clean the glass once in a while, and collect eggs. I mean, collect babies. You could just let them hatch in the tanks and all that. So I decided to do that. So I've been building that up. I'm also looking at a bunch of smaller gecko species. I have a 2,000 square foot building. I like working with glass because I can go I like walking into the room, just like it's why we do most things outside. I like to be able to see it doing its thing. Like I don't want to, when you have them in a drawer and you pull the drawer out, you're kind of disturbing them. So you stop them from doing their thing. So you don't really get that, which I do have plenty of racks. This is not an anti-rack thing. This is just a me personally thing. For me to enjoy the stuff, I need to be able to walk in the room and see it all doing its stuff. And So we have this big building that's basically right now just has indoor outdoor systems for blue tongues that is just unnecessary. Like it doesn't need to be there. The blue tongues can be outside all the time. So I'm going to convert that over to just I have all my tanks in there now, but I'm going to add a bunch of rows of 40s and then fill them with just various, just little oddball geckos, not a lot of anything, maybe 20, 30 species. Uh, I'm looking at a lot of the ground stuff, Chazalai, the helmeted geckos from Morocco, and just different things like that. So for me, that's mostly what I've been doing. I also have lace monitors again, so I'm growing those out. Um, and then I do tree frogs off and on depending on what our financial needs are. The tree frogs are my fail safe. If we have a bad year with something, yeah, that's them. Dude, that's one of my favorite geckos. I used to breed the hell out of those things like in the early 90s, and they're actually kind of hard to get now. And they're super cool. They're like little tiny bulldogs.
Oh yeah, those remind me of viper geckos. Are those like a similar genus to viper geckos, or?
I'm not sure if they are to those, but they're man. I mean, they're basically a big head. They're a big head and a stout body. I mean, they don't get very big. They're maybe 3-4 inches, but uh, yeah, they're one of my favorite geckos. Like I
Yeah,
always
they're kind of like a knobtail, like an African
yeah
version of a knobtail to an extent, right? Like
yeah yeah, and I
yeah,
love
they're pretty
knobtail.
cool.
Knobtails are something I'm going to go back to doing too. I'm that kind of stuff. I also have an entire room full of fat tail geckos, but that was kind of something I took on that I hadn't planned on taking on, but a buddy of mine bought a collection, and yeah, so there's that. But yeah, so I'm doing that, and I have the lace, and then I do various tree frogs, mostly whites and or red eyes, depending on.
Do you
And
do
then
any others? Any other tree frogs? Because I think there's
um,
a few other species that are similar,
I
but
mean, in the past, I've done quite a few different ones. I've done Phalomedusa sauvagii, the Charcoan monkey frog. Um, I've done bird poop frogs. I can't remember what the Latin is on those. That's what they call them.
oh yeah, I did the bird poops a few years ago. The
Oh, did you?
Theloroma, no, something like that. But yeah, no, they're cool. I just had them
They
in like a
are,
10 or
yeah.
20 gallon with like gave them like 3-4 inches of water, put some cork rounds in there, and
Yep.
they would just breed all the time,
Yeah.
kind of thing. They're really neat.
Dude, I didn't even know I was breeding them. Somebody came over and was like, "Hey, man, you got baby frogs in there," and I was like, "No, no, no, dude, those are adult, bird poops." He's like, "No, no, no, there's pinky nail sized froglets in there," and I looked in there, and there was a bunch of them. It was pretty cool. So yeah, I just had them set up because I liked them, and I would hear them croaking all the time. They were just like kind of like in an off section area. But yeah, just like you, I had them in a tank that was full of plants. It had a plant that was in 3 inches of water that had a full root system. So I didn't even know there were tadpoles in there, which cool frog. But yeah, and I've done milk frogs in the past. I can't remember the Latin on those either, but yeah, just various tree frogs. Like tree frogs do really well for me down here because I can just keep them outdoors, and when it rains, most of the time you get something out of it. Um, and uh, and the nice thing about them, at least for me, is they're basically like I said, for the last 40 years, if I've had a bad year, like especially when I was doing a lot of tegus, and I was because I do this for a living, so I'm reliant on I have to make X amount just to keep the lights on and food and a roof over your head. But sometimes you can have bad years if you're dependent on species that are a little more unreliable. And before Heather and I got together, a lot of the stuff I did was unreliable. So I would just, whatever tree frog was being imported, usually I would just go get 10, 20 of those, set them up, get them fed, get them outside, and then it would produce enough on average that I could cover my bills for the year. Red eyes are the best one though for that, I think. The whites are the problem with whites is they flood you with too many babies at once. Like they can really overwhelm you, and it's expensive to get them up to size to market.
Oh yeah, I
Or
remember what's his name? He was on the Amphibicast at one point, but he was talking about how like you could flood the U.S. market with like 5 pairs of
Yeah.
White's tree frogs, basically,
Yep.
in one go. And like the main thing about breeding those is the your cricket cost and raising crickets almost at that point.
That is it. The cricket cost is obscene. So, whereas red eyes are nice. They give you like, 20, 40 babies at a time. They don't eat that much. Like white stray frogs eat. And that ends up
And the
being,
wholesale on the like I'm assuming these are mostly being wholesaled. They would like the
yeah,
wholesale on the red eyes is probably a bit higher in terms
it
of
is.
most of it's wild caught. So if you can produce captive bred, the stores can sell them for
Yes.
a little bit more, which means you can sell them for a little bit more and kind of gauge it on that kind of
Yeah.
cost.
The captive born red eyes sell really well and for decent money. So, whites sell well too for, I was doing the morphs on the whites, so that's how I was kind of making up for that. But,
Oh yeah, the we get some of the morphs up here. Like my buddy will get because there's somebody out east that really breeds whites, I believe, at
mhm,
like a slightly bigger scale. So like he has like the snowflakes and all that, and I'm sure some are also
yeah,
imported from Indo and whatnot, like the Pac-Mans. Like there's like one or two guys that were breeding Pac-Mans, and then like, you'd see some of the morphs, and then but then it's like some of those morphs aren't as strong as we kind of thought they were. So
yeah.
like my like Tyrone was trying like he got like those expensive pink chicken one or whatever. They were like $800 a piece, and then they both just died in like 5 months because they were just so like a little too inbred, I think.
Well, some of that, a lot of people do the horn frogs by using LHRH hormone, and apparently hormone-induced frogs are, at least that's what I've always heard. I've always heard they were weaker compared to naturally bred ones. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds probably like it's legit.
They didn't seem that hard to. Or there was one guy that used to work at the aquarium here that did a bunch of. He did the horns, and then he did a bunch of dart frogs and stuff too. He moved away and kind of moved his collection on. He was bringing fire belly newts and stuff like that. I think he just did them normally, just rain chambered them kind of thing, and they
Yeah,
produced a lot of babies.
yeah, yeah. That's another one that can flood you up, and you can't keep them together. So that's another fun aspect
Like
of.
you could always. What I was thinking is like if I ever wanted to do those, it's like well you just let half the babies eat each other, and then
That's
then you get the really strong ones, and then you sell those guys.
that is one way to do it. Yes, but but yeah. So that's pretty much it, man. Right at the moment, I'm looking into like gecko stuff, and I'm screwing around with the tokays again, and um, you know, I'm looking for low because again, we don't have employees. It's just her and I, and she's pretty much at the rim of what she can take on now, as far because she's got a lot of skinks. We lowered the amount of bearded dragons that we produce. We normally produced anywhere from 2 to 5,000 dragons a year for the pet trade, depending. Dude, that's nothing, man. When I was doing it by
Oh,
myself, I
I
was
bet.
doing 15,000, and but the real companies, like the real companies here that do them on a scale, they'll do 250,000 a year.
Oh yeah.
And there's multiple
Anything
companies.
Petco and PetSmart can
Yeah,
get all of them, right? Like they're
yeah.
The big
And
question
I
is
was
where did they
wholesale.
go?
into Petco and
No,
PetSmart.
no, but I mean like
No, but like
250,000 bearded
yeah,
dragons. They're not in everybody's houses. People are not keeping them
they
for.
are when you to an extent, right? They are right when you think about it. There's a lot of people that have one or two bearded dragons. It's just I'm not in the hobby, but I have
It
one or two bearded
it is
dragons. Like
the
I would say
yeah
they're more common than a ball python,
You
right?
don't
yeah.
Because
think
it's one of the
90% of them are dead within a year?
I
no,
mean it's
no, I
possible.
don't think so. Like it's
Uh,
possible, but I honestly think like yeah, there's probably a percentage just because of the inbreeding and that. But honestly, like I bet you there's a large more than 75% that are people have them for 10, 15 years as a pet, and they're not necessarily in the hobby, but it's you get it for your kid when he's like 10, and then that
And
kind of
that is
thing,
the
right?
most common thing right there is moms buying it because nowadays we only produce enough for retail. So we produce this year, I think we did like 1,000, 1,200, which is about what she can sell retail every year. And almost all of those go to moms that are buying them for their kids. And it's surprising. Look, bearded dragons are not simple to keep. They are actually one of the more complicated reptiles. It's kind of surprising that they became what they became because they don't have all the attributes other than the fact that they're friendly, they're the right size. But other than those two things, as far as husbandry, they're complicated. They require strong UV, they require strong heat, they require a varied diet. Like they have all these, they do not check all the boxes. Crested geckos, much better first, or even the blue tongue. Blue tongues are actually super simple, and then they can be fed stuff you can just get. You never need to feed them anything live. They do just fine on stuff you can pick up at your grocery store. So, so it's kind of a shocker. I mean, it's not, but they basically became the thing that they are because sometime in the 90s, Petco and PetSmart decided they would make them the quote 21st century dog. And they started this ad campaign and they put a lot of money behind it, and they did. But in their, I'm sure that they were looking at the complicated nature of their husbandry as a big plus, because little Timmy buys the bearded dragon, but then he also has to buy a pretty big tank, a lid, a bunch of lights, a lot of equipment. They sell him all the furniture, and then he's got to come back every week and buy bugs from us at whatever, I mean, I've never paid retail for an insect, and when I see what they charge retail, I'm just like, no wonder these. I mean, that's where the money is.
How much are crickets like usually a piece there? I think they're like 12 cents, but I could be wrong. I haven't bought crickets in a while.
Yeah, I don't know. But...
Like you can, like we have, MSR or somebody bought up our local cricket farm. So we have there's one major company that's kind of buying up all the major like producers of wholesale and whatnot, from insects to just reptile wholesale. So like now that market's kind of cornered in that aspect. But yeah, you could get treasure chest of crickets with that boxes of 3,000 for like $30 or something. But I'm sure that's probably expensive for you because you probably get them even cheaper than that.
So we have a very old deal that they have never raised on us. So we get crickets like stupid cheap. Like if we ever lost that, we couldn't replace that with what they charge us. But we buy 150,000 crickets a week or so, some stupid thing like that. It's our biggest bill by far, and our biggest expense is the cricket bill. Like it's offensive. I always look at it like, how the hell are we doing? We're pulling this off and that's just one of the food items that we use, but it is the most expensive one. And crickets die in shipping, and they die while you have them. So the cost of them, I'm sure if we actually added it up, is like 2 and 3 times what you think you're paying for them, because you really don't get that much out of them because they die before you can feed them off a lot of times. Or they come in dead, then they send a replacement thing and half of that one comes in dead. It's like, I hate crickets and I wish I could cut them out altogether, but I've never been able to figure a way to do that. And roaches, a lot of people switch to roaches, but roaches have their own problems. So roaches
I think Chris from the Trap Talk doing the monitor stuff, he talked about how roaches are almost bad in terms of you can give your monitors gout from feeding too many roaches kind of thing. And so we talk about, you should use roaches instead of rodents. Well, it's going to end up with the same issue in the end of gout.
100%. So, we've run into gout issues using roaches, and then we cut them back right away. Like it's one of those things. It's just too rich.
Yeah.
Because I could breed roaches.
I wish somebody up here could breed those grasshoppers, because you guys have a couple guys breeding actual grasshoppers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's legal here or if it is, and nobody's just tapped into it yet.
Legal here either.
So it's like Chris was talking with the tree monitors. Like that's what they're mainly eating. They're eating katydids and big grasshoppers is actually a better natural diet for those tree monitors.
100%. Like they breed the hell out of those grasshoppers in Europe, and they use them. Those guys over there, that's what they use.
I think there's one guy in California, but I'm not sure if stuff's changed or whatnot. But yeah,
you're talking about Kai. Yeah, Kai Fan.
I know Kai does, but there was Dean as well.
Oh, there's another guy?
I think there was another guy. But yeah, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to do this. We have those flying grasshoppers native here. They're all over the property. And I've thought about actually rounding them up because they bounce off my forehead when I'm mowing the lawn. So I'm like, there's so many of them here. I thought about, getting a bunch and trying to breed them here. Um, and who knows, maybe that's something I'll do one day, but I'm pretty sure that it's very difficult to sell them. So it'd be one of those things I could probably do them for our own use, but being able to do anything with them beyond that is probably not something that's feasible. The U.S. is a spider web of laws with all kinds of stuff, and I don't want to run afoul of any of that shit. So if I'm not 100% sure, I usually won't touch it.
Yeah, I know up here it's like the same where like there's people that have certain roaches that you're like dubia are not like allowed here. Obviously, there's certain people that have dubia colonies even though they shouldn't, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But we're allowed to have. I think they've made it legal to have. I think Suriname or what are they?
The discoids.
Discoids. Yeah, we're allowed to have discoids, but they're discoids. You got to keep them hot, and they sometimes don't really start reproducing for a year or two, right? Like they're not very fast at reproducing, so it's kind of
Dude, that's so weird.
they're not great.
We are not. Dubias are completely banned in Florida, but we're allowed to have discoids. But that's because discoids are introduced here, and they're all over in certain cities. They're all over the place. And I actually bought out a guy that was getting out. I bought his entire discoid collection, and that's how we found out that they trigger gout pretty quickly in insectivorous lizards. We started finding it really fast. Maybe 6 months of feeding them the roaches, it started to pop up. So I can't exactly remember. Heather would know more about that, but yeah. And ours, actually, we have a wild roach here that's in all of the bearded dragon enclosures. I mean, and the skink enclosures naturally. And it's funny because the skinks gorge themselves on them for a portion of the year, and they don't have a negative effect on the skinks. So whatever that roach
Maybe it's
is,
a natural diet, maybe, or something.
yeah,
Like they're not
getting a commercial diet. Yeah. And that's probably more than anything, is what the problem is with those.
Yeah.
So
I think after we hit on, I think where Dom wanted to go with it with how the tree boas and the
emeralds.
chondro thing worked out. And I think we want to. I want to circle back and hit the raising of frogs and kind of your systems for that. But let's hit Dom's question first. I'll be right back.
So yeah, actually, I was going to ask, all the cages for your emeralds, did you ever consider trying other similar species, like let's say Amazon tree boas or green tree pythons or other things to? Because if you would have set everything up for emeralds, I mean, you've got other species that are. Let's take just green tree pythons. I mean, they're popular. They make good money. They are not bred in insane numbers.
Yep.
I feel like that could have been a species that could have been worth it as well. I don't know if you just ever considered bouncing from one to the other.
Actually, I did. I was running all three of those.
Okay.
I had groups of Amazon tree boas. Actually, Amazon tree boas and I have a long history together. I have bred them off and on for the last 40 years or so. Like they're one of the first snakes I ever bred, like in the late 80s. And then, I would keep them for a while, mess with them, but they were always hard to sell here, and I'd always end up sitting on it. Today is different, but in the 90s and the early 2000s, there just wasn't a lot of interest, and they were importing up tons of them, so they were really cheap. So I couldn't really justify. Like I said, I do this for a living, so even though it's not about the money, it had a certain amount has to be made, or we can't do it. And we just could barely pay for them. So I keep them for a few years, then I get out of them, then I get back, then I get them again. I'll be at a place and see a really badass orange one and be like, oh, I gotta have that. So next thing you know, I've got 6 of them again. So I was running those. I bought some of the leopards and some of the other mutations that were available of the Amazon tree boa, and then I bought 40, not 40. I had 28 chondros. Yeah, I bought 28 imported chondros, and I had them in a separate area. And then I had, I don't remember how many emeralds I had. I think I had 64 or 50 something. I can't remember. But I had somewhere between 50 and 65 emerald tree boas. All imports. I bought them all at the same time or within a few weeks because I wanted to I'm bringing in imports. I want to rip the Band-Aid off. I want everything brought in at the same time and then close down, and lock it in, see what happens with them. They were all outdoors. They were in separate areas especially for the first few months. Of those things, the Amazon tree boas and the chondros did amazing. I had no issues at all. And the only reason that I sold those at the time that I did was because I was starting to have problems with the emeralds, and I felt like, okay, if I'm going to figure this out, I just need to focus on this. So I
Just to
called
clarify, you sold all the chondros because of the
Yeah.
emeralds?
Yeah, because I didn't know if I had something going on. I didn't want to risk crossing something into them. Like I said, they were all separate. They were from different things. So I called friends of mine up and I said, look, I built this chondro collection. Like a bunch of people that I knew jumped on it and took them. So I got all that stuff out of here. I got the Amazons out. I got the emeralds, and I got the chondros out. And so, because I figured, okay, I'm going to lock down, focus on these emeralds. I don't know what's going on here, but a lot of it didn't make sense. And basically what happened was for 6 months, 100% of those emeralds were eating, holding their meals down, defecating on schedule. It was amazing. And lots of people, zoo people came out here and saw it. Lots of people, other herpers, a bunch of well-known ones came out here and they were like, man, this is awesome. This is really working. And it was on track. And then it was Daytona, the expo. And I have a ritual with Daytona because we're going to generally be gone for 3 or 4 days. I will feed everything before we leave on Friday. So I fed all the emeralds on Friday and we went to Daytona. We finished it. And I came back home Sunday night. Monday morning when I got up to go outside, the temperature had dropped considerably. Now, this is the middle of August, and where we're at in Florida, you don't get cold fronts in August. Like, it's just not a thing. But this was clear that it was a cold front. It wasn't really cold. It was like in the low 60s. But that just doesn't happen that time of year. So, and on top of that, I had the emeralds had not been rained on for like 4 days. So the first thing I did when I noticed that it was cold, but I didn't really think much of it. And then it warmed right back up that day to 80 some degrees. So I was like, all right, it's fine. 60 something is something that emeralds should take no problem. Where they're from, it does get that cold. It gets colder than that occasionally. And they can take that. That's not a big deal, especially when they're getting sun back. It's not like they're being held at those temperatures. So it's a very brief time. So it shouldn't have been an issue. And notably, nothing else regurged. There wasn't a single chondro regurged at that moment. No Amazon tree boas regurged, and they were all in the same conditions. Just spaced out by a couple 100 feet. So that Monday, I rolled everything under this giant overhead sprinkler system that I have that I can simulate rainstorms, and I rained on everything to get it hydrated back up after 3 or 4 days. And the following day, every single emerald tree regurgitated. The chondros did not do that, and the Amazon tree boas did not do that. But every emerald regurged, and I'm like,
what's your thinking behind that?
So I went through a few different things. One, I thought, okay, this doesn't really make sense. Maybe we reached some sort of. The first thing we thought of was, is it related to food? Is it? Because one of the things that I had heard a lot from the collectors and the people that we talked to that have collected emeralds in the wild down in Suriname was they eat a specific rat called a spiny rat, and that rat eats just fruit and seeds. So it's not eating, a grain-based commercial diet, which is what all of our, available rodents eat. So we think is maybe at some point it does damage to the gut. But it still doesn't really make sense because it's all at once. How the hell do you go from perfect to all of a sudden all of them regurged? But I went kind of along those lines. So that's what we were thinking. So I give them 4 to 6 weeks without trying to feed them. I just worked on keeping them hydrated. And then I fed them again, and they all regurged again. So I'm like, what the hell? So then I really doubled down on the food thing. And I basically took a whole bunch of not wild caught, of fresh rodents that I got from, from a rodent guy. And I emptied them out. I left them, I just fed them fruit and seeds while they were here. And I gave them like, I don't remember how many days. It was at least 3 days. It might have been like 7 or 8. It was kind of random at the time. Like I said, I was pulling, I was really, kind of, because I have always wanted to do emeralds, and I really thought that because I basically took my arboreal system that I built for these giant anoles, and I ported it over and then made some changes, and like I said, I had the ability to simulate full rainstorms here, like. And I always assumed that hydration was a big problem with captive emeralds, because when you see a lot of them, a lot of them always look dehydrated. So I'm like, okay, well they're drinking rainwater. They're just a dew catcher. They're not, they're not drinking puddled water all the time. So maybe that's it. Maybe the method because we've discovered over the years there's a whole bunch of lizard species that we always maintained at like borderline, hydrated enough, because we weren't offering them water in the way that they recognize. And then, you figure out
the chameleons in Africa and stuff, right? How
yeah.
Overnight they uptake all their hydration just from breathing. And then kind of, yeah.
I mean, bearded dragons. Think about the stupidity of the way we water them. People throw them in a thing of water. Well, it's a it's a dry habitat lizard that's not going to be sitting in water every time it needs to drink. It drinks dew, and they probably also get a lot of their hydration.
And it's probably more humid in the air than you would think, right? Like we had Fadi on last week, who was just in the UAE, and he's like, yeah, it's the desert, but it's humid
At night.
Like it feels super humid. Even during the day, it can be humid there too. So it's or right, like the beardies in there, they dig a tunnel underground. Well, 2 feet down, the humidity down there is like 90%, right?
Yeah. So I had a bunch of different thoughts. Anyway, I started to pursue the dietary thing, and there were some indications initially that this is working. Some of them held down their meals after I purged as a matter of fact, a large portion of them after 6 weeks of feeding them those rats. It was only one feeding though, so I waited 6 weeks. I fed them this feeding. And a large portion of them held that meal down. But there were a couple things that were a little bit different about it that I didn't. One is that the rodents lost weight while they were eating, because the commercial rodent we have is not, that it's no longer built to eat that diet. So even though they were eating and they were staying alive, they were not the big fat rodents that we're used to feeding them off. So they were actually much lighter. So it was a smaller meal technically. And, so the meal was smaller than it probably should have been for the size of the rodent, and I had basically emptied their guts as best as I could, or that I know of, the commercial diet. Anyway, a bunch of them held it down, so I thought, okay, we're on the right track. This is the thing. I just need to get some African soft furs and raise my own on this diet, and I'll fix it. So, because they held that meal down, I waited a couple more weeks. I did it again. I did the same thing, and most of them held that, but I did have a couple regurges that I didn't even know until like weeks later that they regurged. I happened to find them in one of the potted plants, and I was like, oh shit, some of them did puke. But still, a lot of them held it down. And then I thought, okay, I fixed it. This is what it is. So I fed them 10 days later, because these were all, I was trying to get the weight back on them that they had lost from and then a bunch of them puked. And then I was like, what the hell? Long story short, anyway, bouncing around, tried a whole bunch of things. Eventually I gave up, and I called two different friends of mine. I was like, look, I'm at my wit's end with this. Do you want to take these over and see if you can work your magic? They knew exactly what was going on. And we sent a bunch of them out to be tested. They didn't find a single thing in these things. There was no crypto. There was no, none of the usual suspects. Like my assumption at the time was, oh shit, there's crypto in here. There's something like that. There's some sort of pathogen that's going through this. But they found nothing. Like they were tested for all kinds of stuff multiple times. They found nothing. So, two different people got some, and it was Amy Benzie who ended up with the pixel, the notochondro thing. She wanted to mess with it. We sent it to her. She's actually turned it around, and it's on its way back. And what basically her assumption, and I'm pretty sure she's right, is what really happened was that cold front. It was, like I said, it hit at a time, even though it wasn't really that cold, when they were digesting their food. And then on top of that, I rained on them. But see, I use my well. My water system is run by my well, and the cold front may have chilled the well just enough so that when I rained on them, the water was cold. I didn't even think about that. And then I was raining on the stuff the whole time. So I kept chilling these things without really realizing that the well was cold. So even on days that were hot, or weeks that were hot here, all these regurgits happened in the wintertime. And then her analysis is, once they regurge once, that their gastric juices damage their entire, digestive system on the way out so badly that it looks like it takes months for it to heal. And so every time I was feeding them, I was making it worse. Every time they regurged, it was damage upon damage. So, that's what it looks like. But after we didn't really, it was Amy more or less that put this together. And then when she said this, all of a sudden I started thinking, oh man, I started seeing all the connections. And then as I was blind to it. I was so, it was causing me a lot of stress. I had a lot riding on this. And I once your mind gets, clouded and you can't, I just didn't. So she probably cracked it.
How long was it between when you got the animals and when they started in August, kind of thing?
Yeah, it was like 6 or 8 months. Like they were doing great, man. Because I got them in early spring. So all through the spring, all through the summer, everything was fine. They were eating, they were drinking, they were beautiful. And then it was just like the legs got kicked out from under the table. And then by the time I realized, I was like, man, I should have just kept the chondros were doing great. I was really digging those because, man, outside, chondros do amazing. Like they do, and especially when they're in big enclosures, they are cool as hell to watch. Like I had the herper from Australia come down, and he was like, man, that's badass. He was like, when I get home, I'm gonna put mine outside, and he's in Australia where you can really, but yeah, I had no issues at all with the chondros. Like the chondros really tailored for here. Now I wouldn't leave them out in the cold, because anything that lives in a tree, we basically roll it into a heated building when it's cold. Because even with the plastic, I don't want to expose them to those kind of temperatures that we can potentially see. And anything that's tropical, I don't leave out in like real cold. But that's also why I primarily don't work with tropical stuff. Like the blue tongues and the bearded dragons aren't really tropical reptiles. They're like subtropical at best. Although I guess there's an argument to be made that the New Guinea stuff would technically be tropical, but I'm telling you right now, they are unaffected by this cold weather at all. They are exactly the same as the other ones. So, but yeah, the emerald thing was bad. It was. I know.
Well, was it? We had MJ on a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that a lot of people get them in, and they're just screwed from the start in terms of they just regurge immediately as the emeralds come in.
Yeah.
So that almost makes I was thinking about it earlier today, and that almost makes me think that maybe wherever they were held, or maybe some of them were maybe captive hatched to an extent and then brought in. Maybe they were, however they were being kept or something, and maybe they tried to feed them back in South America, and then they
Well,
were
they
regurged before they even came, and they're already damaged, and that might be that issue maybe in itself or it in
Yeah,
some
no,
way.
he's 100% right about that. They definitely do feed them. I've been sent pictures of them showing me, oh, these things eat, and they feed commercial rodents. Um, but they, but again, a lot of those guys, they're hunters. They're not breeders. They're collectors. So they don't really. They just keep the stuff as basic as they can until they can get it out. To whoever's buying them. Um, so when you get stuff that's brought in from other countries, the vast and I have my career is loaded with bringing in imports and then turning them into captive bred systems, and then getting those to the public so they get a good solid animal that hasn't gone through hell before it gets here. And I like to work with species that nobody else is working on for the most part, and and I also like to be the founder of the stuff that I'm working on, so I know exactly what it is, where it's from. I have more control over what I'm doing. So I've done a lot of imports. Probably, I don't honestly know how many species, but I've done so much different stuff, mostly because I'm riddled with ADD and don't stay on anything for very long before I get bored and go on to the next thing. Um, but it was the vast majority of it was made off of import stuff. So I'm pretty good at establishing it, and I can tell you with certainty that the number one problem with most imports is they're all dehydrated as hell because they've gone through this long, lengthy process. Most likely they've been held suboptimally and I'm probably being generous on that, for quite a bit of time before they make it over here, and then so part of the reason for the rain system that I have is so that like I just did it with the tokays. I bought some imported tokays and I run them underneath this rain event, for every day for an hour a day for almost a week when I bring in something that's wild caught. And that way it gets fully fucking hydrated. Like you're hitting all the stuff, they have water bowls, but they're also getting a rain event, and then and that almost always will turn them around. And I think if you get an imported emerald, you don't really. I mean, I watched a guy at the show today that I was at selling a very sickly, clearly in bad shape emerald, and he was selling it to somebody that was walking by, and I was looking at that going, well, that thing looks to me like it probably regurged a few times at the very least, and it was definitely dehydrated because their head sinks in. Emeralds are kind of easy to tell. Um, so yeah, and I think she's right. I think once they regurge once, then you have to wait a long time before you can actually try feeding them. And I mean, think about what all of our kind of, habits are. When something pukes, you heat it back up, you make sure it's got plenty of water, you wait 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever. Then you try to feed it again because I think for a lot of us, we're like freaking out that it puked even one time, like with any species. And so in a lot of cases, that's not an issue. But if it's something that has, you know, uh, maybe the gastric, the intestinal, uh, I don't know what the word is, juice for those things is so acidic, maybe it's like super potent and it just does a lot more damage than like if a ball python regurges, they bounce back pretty quick. Um, but the interesting thing is that so one of the things when I went public about that, I got a lot of emails and phone calls from a lot of very well known breeders that told me their story about a similar thing, and every one of them, they all were all the species were from the same fucking area that those emeralds are from. They were all like northern South America, right on the equator. And they were red tail boas. They were, um, uh, what do you call it? It was red tail boas. It was rainbow
Sp-
boas,
Spilotes
spilotes.
as well.
Yeah, like a couple of spilotes people that were working on Spilotes said you can't feed them anything bigger than a mouse or they puke it up. And I was like, how does that make any sense? That's a giant. I mean, I kept those for a long time. That's a massive snake. There's nobody out there going, I'm sorry, you can't eat that big rat over there. You can only eat something the size of a mouse. That doesn't make sense. And I'm sure they're not puking all over the countryside.
So yeah, I'd love to put my 2 cents on that. So just here's my thing. And so I hear people talk about it all the time, right? And they talk about emeralds. Just give them a big meal, get it over with, find out if it's good or if it's bad, right? And you hear that side of the token, and I get why that works. Because if it can eat a big meal, it doesn't puke, it's fine. That means it never regurgitated before. You've got zero issues. My thinking is the animals that are regurging, if you give them a big meal, it's because either it already regurged or it's crazy stressed because it's a very stressed out animal, and you give it to them, it regurges, and then after that, the only reason the smaller meals work is that a bigger meal, when it goes down the digestive tracts, it takes down a lot of that digestive juice, a lot of the coating in your tract that is slowly being built up over time. But as you eat large meals, it removes even more and more and irritates the digestive tract more and more. But a small meal won't remove all that coating that takes a long time to protect, right? Because your digestive tract is a very strong acidic thing, right?
But and maybe it's still like kind of affecting it negatively to an extent too, which is why you still can't, after a month, upgrade the meal, right?
It's does still affect doing it, right? Something. Take it in humans. I mean, like in humans, when you have indigestion, you're going to keep having that indigestion. You take pills, and then you might have to take a pills up to 2 months to rebuild the coating in your digestive tract to stop having digestion. Then you can get off the pills and live normally and have no problems, right? So sometimes it's just that you need to rebuild that inner coating inside your digestive tract to be able to get back to that point. So my thinking is this: emeralds are very high stress animals. Coming in wild caught, they become ridiculously high stress. So there is 2 trains of thought. You get the emeralds, leave them the fuck alone. Give them time to get, rehydrate them. Don't feed them for a while. Get them to be completely about as stress-free, then start feeding them. Or give them a large rat, see if they're okay. Or they go right down the crapshoot. Then if they puke, you basically have to wait a ridiculous amount of time to feed them. And keep in mind, I've never kept emeralds. I just want to put it right out there. That's just my thinking. So I feel like that's kind of where my brain goes into everything that you're talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
my 2 cents.
Dude, that sounds probably spot on, man, because I did one of the 2 things you said. I initially got them in. I put them in these big, planted enclosures with basins of water and hydrated the hell out of them. I didn't feed them for the first month, and then I started feeding them, and then everyone held them out. So had I not had the cold front if I hadn't, it was basically my fuck up, right? I mean, I didn't realize that 62 degrees or whatever it was for a very brief period of time would be enough to cause the regurg. And it may not have been. It may have been the fact that I rained on them that day too for an hour with cold. I didn't realize the water was that cold. So it was probably something like that. But had I not done that, they probably would never have regurged. But once they regurged, then I didn't realize what was causing it. And in my attempts to remedy it, I was just making everything worse.
So basically, it's one stressful event that made him go down that route. So now the question is, how long should the time span be before you restart them? Should it be 2 months? Should it be 4 months? Should it be 6 months? I think that's kind of like the key where we haven't figured it out, if that is what's actually happening.
Yeah. Again, it's all ifs, right? It's all conjecture. But yeah, I mean, I waited 6 weeks the first time. Then near the end, before I ended up putting them with other people, I was waiting. I waited 2.5 months, 2 months, somewhere in that time frame. And it did nothing. So she was feeding at least the Notochondro. She fed it small meals, and she let it go for, I think she said 6 months. And now she actually has been increasing the meal size, and it's holding them down. So I think her idea was right, and I think also your idea of the stomach lining problem is also probably correct. To me, that's I didn't. I mean, it's clear it's something like that. There's some, whether it's damage, directly to that, or it's the, the the stuff on the wall, the digestive system. I don't know. They just fall into. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like you said earlier, even chondros, nobody does them on a commercial scale. And everybody that I know that's ever attempted to do any of those tree snakes, either emeralds or chondros, on a commercial scale, and when I say commercial scale, I'm talking 150 specimens or more. No, nobody fails. Everybody fails. Like nobody does it. It's not like there's for lack of financial incentive, right? I mean, chondros, even to this day, the chondro prices in the U.S. are going through the roof. And emeralds, you can sell captive born emeralds sell very well for $1,500 to $3,000, depending on what they look like. I mean, that's better than most ball pythons by a considerable margin, actually, other than a few people that have a few very specific things. So why is that? After 50 years, why does nobody do it? And I think the reason is two things. One, I think emeralds in particular are very touchy. You can't make any mistakes. If you make a mistake, you're basically done. And I heard from a lot of people, and I can't name names, but I heard a lot of people directly contacted me and said, yeah, I tried emeralds. I tried 20 specimens. I tried 40 specimens. I did really well for 1 to 2 years, but at the 2-year mark, it all crashed and burned. And almost everybody said, the ones that made it to 2 years said that 2 years was the deadline. Well, if you look at that, that could be just that after 24 months, you had 24 months to make a mistake, or then once you make a mistake with them and they regurge, that's it, you're done. So it's a tricky thing. I think with chondros, it's just that there's probably like a few major husbandry flaws that we haven't really dialed in directly. I feel like it's mostly related to hydration in them. They're just, like I said, I probably will revisit chondros. I will never attempt to do them on that scale again. I'll probably get 10 pairs maybe, and just put them outdoors for most of the year, in an indoor-outdoor system. There's a guy in Australia that somebody turned me on to that does them all outside in Australia too, and he does them in like those big, like Reptibreeze type cages, big screen cages, and he's got them like around his pool, and it's amazing. They do really well, and that's what I saw here too. They were awesome, man. When there was a real rainstorm, I would go out there at night with a flashlight, and they were all cruising around and and hunting and doing all this stuff. It was really, really cool. And the emeralds were doing that too, but the chondros, I had no issues at all. I really regret that I made that decision, but I figured, I know myself, and at that point I was like, okay, I'm having a real problem with the emeralds. I just need to buckle down, ignore everything else, and just put 100% into this and try to figure this out. And I just ran out of will before. And I was on the wrong track, so I wasn't going to figure that out. It really took for a fresh set of eyes. And it happened to be Amy. And Amy comes at it really, she's really not, she's kind of new to all this. So she comes without all the baggage that we all have from being in this. When you get a lot of information and you're constantly intaking information, a lot of stuff builds up that may or may not be true that you don't even really think about. So she's looking at it from we all build up bias and stuff like that based on what we think or believe. She was coming at that like fresh. Like she doesn't really have that. And she goes there all the time to Suriname and has seen them in the wild and gone out with the collectors and collected them and, all that. So she's got on the ground, information firsthand that I certainly don't have. And I'm not dedicated to any of this shit enough to go to the country of origin. And, I love what I do and I like breeding stuff. But I don't want to leave here for 2 weeks at a time. And I'm too old for
Well,
that shit now, man.
Alan had to prod you pretty hard to get you out to California. It sounded like.
Okay, yeah, so you know that story. Yeah, and I was like 20, 29 at the time, man. I was like, but I had never look. I grew up in a in a very working class. You know, my family didn't have any money. When I started this whole thing. I had my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and I was 19 at the time, and we had like $60 in the bank. And I was like, okay, well now I got to do something because I got a kid coming, and so I started really getting serious about this. And then I met Alan shortly after that, and I couldn't have afforded a plane ticket anyway. And I was like, yeah, dude, I've never been on a plane. I'm terrified of planes. I ain't doing it. And man, I get a friggin' letter in the mail from Alan, and I open it up, and there's a friggin' plane ticket in there, so I had to go. It was actually he did me a real solid on that. That was an eye opener. I got a behind the scenes at San Diego Zoo, and I got to see all this crazy stuff, and it was good. And Alan and Rapashi and I have been friends now for like we're almost the same age. He's a little older than me, but we kind of both kind of grew up in this. And he was in California, and I was down here in the unwashed groin of America called Florida. And so you know,
Well, you had Hank Moulton that's still kind of lingering around South Florida at that point, right? Too. So you had all that fun stuff from the books back then.
dude, I did very little with. I mean, I bought and sold stuff to the Florida guys, but that was not my scene. My scene was really those California guys. It was Philippe de Beaujolais, it was Rapashi, it was Bob Mayu. Because the guys in Florida, it was more about. Well, first of all, the Florida scene was largely built off. There was a lot of drug. They were cocaine importers and stuff. So there was a lot of that. And it was not as serious. I mean, we do have some, you have Bill and Kathy Love and people like that. But, and Crutchfield.
And Eugene as well, right?
And, yeah, and Eugene. But they're different. All those guys are
Like that,
very
like
different.
right, like Eugene and the Barkers and the Loves are kind of in their. They're commercialized and also scientific to an extent, right?
Yeah,
They got their thing, while Crutchfield and the other guys are kind of in their more import export kind of
at the time, yeah.
dealings, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, but the guys in California, especially in Southern California, that scene, those guys were all like super nerdy. It was all based around Bavarian magazine. They were all into like all the little weird lizards and stuff that I was into. So that was kind of ended up being my scene. I spent a lot of time on the phone with those guys. Like a lot of the stuff that I do today was stuff that we all would sit and talk for hours about and kind of war game over and trade ideas. And um, so, I mean, I did have Burt Langerwerf on this coast. He was up in Alabama, but there was a little bit of a language barrier there. Burt had a very heavy accent, so he was hard to understand on the phone a lot of times. Like I'd see him in person, and then Bert's way of doing things was like totally different than everybody else's too. Like Bert, and actually a lot of stuff that I do today is ideas that I got from Langerwerf when I was a kid, because I was this scrappy kid that used to call Bert, pester him, when I could about all the stuff, and he was like, "Don't go buying anything that expensive stuff." He's like, "Go to the junkyard and get aluminum siding at the junkyard," and he's like. And you can pick up roadkill when you find it on the road and feed it to your tigers. I'm like, dude, I am not putting a dead raccoon in my car. I'm just letting you know. My wife would murder me in front of you to send a message. But yeah, he carried and when I went to, he was something, man. He was like a legit mad scientist. He was super, super good at this.
And he was from the 70s too, right? So he was from like that Dick Ross era of
yeah.
Well, they let me on the airplane with this.
Yeah, Bert
It was totally fine.
Bert was legit, man. It's a funny thing about Bert Langerwerf. His idea of selling he used to produce a lot of Australian water dragons, the Leisure Eye, and he was having trouble selling them in America, like because the people didn't know really here. We're kind of this different thing. So he used to hibernate the babies in a suitcase, and then he would take them in a giant suitcase full of these baby hibernated leisure, and then he would take them to Europe and then ride and get on the train system there and meet herpers at different stops, have it all set up, and he would sell leisure eye out of a suitcase while they were hibernating because they were out and they were cool. It was an easy way to a safe way to travel with them. That was his thing, man. And I'm like, man, that's an awful lot of trouble, dude. You could just advertise here and just ship them out and be done with it. No, he had all kinds of ideas like that. But his ideas about using, like stuff that you can readily get, especially stuff that you can get used or cheap, because you got to always keep your costs low. And I have absolutely stolen a lot of ideas from him over the years that I still use today.
Because he kept everything outside as well, right? Like
Yeah.
he was one of those OG, like, we're gonna keep Euromastics outside in Alabama
Yep.
kind of thing.
Yep.
Make
And
it
it
all work
worked
that
too.
way.
I went and saw that place after he passed away because I bought a small portion of some of the things that were left. So I went and met his wife and his son up there. And he had tried to get me to come up there the whole time while he was alive, and I really regret the fact that I never. I mean, it was only like a 20-hour drive from where I lived, but I never did it. So Scott Corning and Scott is one of the founding sailfin dragon breeders in the U.S. He was like one of the. So Scott and
Oh yeah,
I.
I remember Alex Meyer talking about him because
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Alex is starting to work with all that stuff
yeah,
and the Chinese water dragons that are also now uncommon to see.
correct. Yep. So Scott and I carpooled it up there, and we bought a bunch of the adult leisure eye and stuff. But man, I'm telling you, when I walked into that place, I could not believe what he had done there. Like it was amazing. Like all the cages, you walked on this kind of walkway that he had, and all the cages were below ground. Like that had to suck to service because you got to get down on your knees. And Bert was not a young man by this time. So I was looking at that going, man, this must have really been miserable to work on, if you have to do something every day. But man, it was rock solid. Those animals could have survived a nuclear bomb the way he had them set up. And then he had this giant cave, like a legit cave. I don't know what the hell it was. And it was covered with trees and grass were growing over it, so it was completely underneath like dirt. And you walk down inside the cave, and in the center of it was a massive superworm breeding thing. It was just this one huge concrete. Imagine an in-ground swimming pool that you kind of pulled up about 3 feet off the ground, and it was filled with like mud and dirt. It looked like the bottom of a cave. And he was breeding superworms and roaches in this thing. Like it was nuts. And then he had windows.
Just like loose over the whole bottom of the
Yeah,
concrete.
the whole thing.
Oh wow.
And then, like I said, man, that dude did a lot of amazing stuff. That was a big loss when he passed away. That was he would have continued to contribute a lot to this hobby.
Did
Because
he
again,
do? Was he renowned for anything else? Because obviously I've heard the water dragons, right?
tegus.
Julander and okay, yeah, Tegus and that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was black and white tegus. He did a lot of lacerdas. He had when I was there, he had 110 Chinese alligator lizards. They were outside breeding.
Oh, the
The
Shinosaurus, right?
Shinosaurus. Yep, yep. He had dude. There was so much stuff there. It was amazing, truly an amazing place. And then it went up for sale, and we had actually considered buying it, but it went up for sale 2 weeks after I had put a down payment on a house. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call saying that the Langerworth farm is for sale, and it was pretty cheap for what it was. And I would have totally bought that, but 2 weeks too late. It was
Yeah,
just,
that would have been pretty cool.
yeah.
He
So
wrote a book as well, right? He was a guy that wrote a book, I think, or
yeah, and I
somebody
think
wrote a book about him.
well, Russ Gurley wrote a book about him,
Oh, yeah.
the Lizard Man, and there's a lot of. It was basically, but Russ wrote that with him while he was still alive. I think. I'm pretty sure Russ was over there, and yeah, Russ is another one, man. If you haven't had him on here, he's one to get.
I'm not sure if he's done a podcast. Maybe he has done like a turtle one or something, but he is fantastic because Dom Russ is like one of the guys that writes like almost like Bob Ashley does a bunch of the books, but I'm not sure if Russ does it with Bob or sometimes does it with Bob. But like he's one of the main book producing guys
Yeah.
For
her
turtles?
stuff. Just
A
reptiles
lot
in
of stuff.
general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
And
by curiosity, if you would have bought the farm in Alabama, would the weather have changed for you? Being 20 hours away, I imagine it wouldn't have been.
Oh yeah.
Is it a colder weather or is it a bit warmer?
No, it's a lot colder.
So
Yeah.
wouldn't that have changed everything for you?
Well, I mean, Bert was doing a lot of the same stuff I was doing, but the thing is he put his enclosures underground, so they were below, like he dug out like 6 feet down. These cages were 6 feet deep, so and they were flush with the ground. Like I said, he had to kneel down and then kind of reach way in there. But he was a tall dude, like he had long arms and stuff. It was a strange setup. But then he would just, in the wintertime when it got real cold, he would just put carpets over top of the ground, and it kept everything underneath below the frost line, but where he was, he actually sent me photos, and I think Russ actually published photos in that book of his entire place covered in snow. And underneath that snow, those enclosures, without any electricity, kept all those animals alive. So I don't need to do that in Florida. I don't have to go below the ground because even when we get a freeze, it lasts for, like tonight, it's going to supposedly freeze, maybe get 32, 30. It won't hit that temperature until like almost 7 a.m. And by 8 a.m., the sun is out, and we can't get really cold without sun. So the sun will come out, it'll heat right back up. But where he's at, that's a different story. Like he's in full temperate. I'm in a subtropical zone. He's in a temperate zone.
Yeah, that's why like listening to you speak about it, I feel like you might have been, in a good place to buy it and have all these cages already pre-made, but I feel like that would be 1,000 times harder and would limit your species. And I don't know.
For sure.
I feel like it would have probably changed the outcome of your, I don't know, your breeding career. Let's put it that way.
Oh no, yeah, no, absolutely. I would have definitely focused more on like the blue tongues would have been fine there, and the bearded dragons would have been okay. And at the time I was doing all those different tegu species, all of them would have been okay. The blue tegus would have been a little risky, but yeah, I would have focused more on colubrid. I've done a lot of North American colubrids, and in the past I probably would have put a lot more into that. I would have gone that direction. Like I like doing snakes outside. It's just cool as shit.
What kind of snakes were you thinking of doing outside? I'm just curious.
Here, or if I would have gone there?
Both. It'd be cool to hear what you would do different kind of between both places.
Well, no,
maybe.
if I would have gone here, I've already kind of dabbled in it a little bit, and like I said, at some point I'm probably going to, as we get this blue tongue thing sort of stable and rolling, and because we keep like hard caps on the number of animals, like we have in our heads, we know, okay, we can't exceed this number. And while you're building up your colonies, you're looking for the best of the best. You kind of exceed it for a little while and then you get it back down. So right now we're in that kind of phase where there's more here than really what we want to be here. And then once that gets kind of stable, then I'll start looking back again at like the large colubrids, the cribos, the spilotes, again, stuff like that. They're all well suited for where I'm at. If I had gone to where Bert is, I would have done a lot more like corn snakes and different king snakes and, all that kind of like popular, local colubrids. There's a lot. I liked a lot of the European stuff too. And I probably
like you get Russian rats and
Yeah.
Japanese rats.
Yeah, and the diadems and all that.
Yeah.
I
those
like
would all
all
be
of
neat.
that stuff, man. I mean, I really do love it all. Like that's why one of the reasons why I bounce around, like it's all interesting. My main thing is that once I get it really doing what it's supposed to do and it really starts cranking out, then I get bored with it. And I'm just like, okay, I did this. Now I got to find something else that will cause me a lot of stress and headache. And so Heather's kind of put the kibosh on that recently because she's like, you You get it up to where it just starts really making money, and then you get rid of it and you go on to something else. That's kind of been my Achilles
The
heel.
pleasure of the chase and understanding the species, not actually doing it when you're making money. It's
Yeah,
all about getting there.
it is. Dude, it's totally. That's why I said the morph thing doesn't really interest me that much. I like looking at them, and it's cool, but I don't really want to do that. I want to work out like species and systems.
Maybe we need to give you some more rare boas to work with, like the Bahama boas or the Madagascar giants and some
I do.
stuff that's not really around.
Sanzinia or something. I absolutely will
Oh,
have.
those would be cool too. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Sanzinia or something. They're very high on my list of to acquire stuff. Um,
Did you ever play with Kylobothris over the years, or
um,
not too much?
no, no. I'm trying to think. I mean, there was a time where I had a substantial boa collection of all the species. I Cuban boas are one of my favorites. Love those big angle
Oh,
angulifers.
I can keep those once I move. I'm definitely gonna get some Cubans at some point.
Dude, you know what the nice thing about those is? The baby is like 3 feet long. It comes out big enough to eat a rat. They're just, and they don't have a lot of babies, so that's kind of the downside. They have like 3 to 5, but they're
Yeah.
massive. The only problem is, man, those things, I've been chased by a big one. Like I had one that was probably 10 feet. Oof, they don't play. And they will chase you. If they get out of their enclosure, they will actually go after you. They keep trying to strike and they push you back. And they're big, so they're scary. It's not something I don't think I'd want to be bit by. But yeah, I had a really like super aggressive one. Once he got out
Yeah,
of the cage, they stopped. But yeah,
they're a chapter in the brand new West Indian Boas book. Like whoever the guys that wrote that book, like they gave him like 15-page chapter compared to every other species got like 2, 3, 4 pages. They got like a 15, 20 page like book in the middle
yeah.
of the book, which is kind of cool.
So
Because
what book is
Peter
that?
Tolson, Boas of the West Indies.
I didn't
I
even
think
know.
Reynolds, and that came because Peter Tolson and Henderson, they did it. They had the older book from the early
Yeah,
'90s, but they were, I think, at least Henderson was also involved with Reynolds and a couple other guys in this newer one, where they have like all the new species in it as well. Because he got Argentum, and he got there's a Schwarzei and a few other newer Kylobothus species from like the Bahamas and the Caicos that are like, oh, this is a new one kind of thing. Where they won't even say which island they're from just because of certain people in this world. So yeah, no,
yeah.
it's a fantastic book, and it has
I'll have
all
to
that
check that
fun
out.
stuff
I
in it.
wasn't even aware that was out. Yeah,
I think
that's cool.
it's been out for a couple years now. But yeah, no, sure I'm sure it's still readily available because yeah, they went really deep into the Cubans and obviously all the other species as well. Because I think they even said that in the wild, like Cubans have actually big litters, right? Because they can get 12 to, I think the biggest was maybe 15, 16 feet. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but the biggest Cuban boa could eat a chicken. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, the only thing that ever really kept me, I actually did have a lot. Like I had Dominicans and Jamaicans and a bunch of the different ones. The one thing that always kept me out of those was the babies or lizard eaters. And they eventually go through that, that kind of food change on their own. But I mean, I guess you can force it if you want to send pinkies and do all that. But I
Yeah,
was never much.
apparently the at least the Jamaicans and Puerto Ricans, like Rob Stone, Bob Stone,
Yeah,
and Jeff Murray and Steve Woodward, they've kind of figured out a way with the anole juice and whatnot where they'll just take pinkies scented now pretty easily. Obviously, you get Ford Eye, which are like they're a little
yeah.
smaller, right? Those guys you need to assist feed them for a year or two until they're big enough to even take a pinky kind of thing. But yeah, they're interesting. I got some Bahama boas that were imported from Jeff a while ago, kind of
Oh,
thing.
really?
So that's like my trying to try to keep that project going because Cody Joe has the other pair of them. So we'll see what we can do with them.
Yeah, Jeff Murray, right? Yeah, he's been doing those forever, man. I've been hearing his name associated with that for like decades. And
Yeah.
funny, Rob Stone was here like 6 months ago. I think he came by,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and he was out. He was going through all the. He's like, man, you got all the snake hunting. This because I have 5 acres and the whole perimeter I leave completely alone because I don't want anybody. You can't even see my house from the road. Like it's all when you get in here, you come in, it's way in the back, and there's kind of like this open area where all the animals in the house is. But all around it is all this stuff, right? And because I built all these systems over the years out of all this different stuff, whenever I have like good snake stuff, I'll put it around the perimeters, and so there's all this high grass around it, and man, you can flip it over sometimes. You'll get corn snakes, you'll get southern hogs, you'll get Heather actually 2 days ago was around one of the skink enclosures, found an indigo shed. So that was pretty cool. And we knew they were here because when we moved in here, there was this in the building in the back. There's this like bathroom that's totally defunct. Like the toilet doesn't work. Nobody's been in there for looks like years, right? So it was kind of abandoned. But when I went in there, around the toilet was an indigo shed, and it was big. So we knew they were here, and we have gopher tortoises all over the property. So Rob was kind of hoping he would run into something like that. So he was going through all the like piles of like black pieces of tar paper and stuff like that. But he didn't find anything when he was. Well, actually, I think he did find some native skinks and stuff like that. But yeah,
I can just imagine the neighbors looking at like Google Earth and like checking the properties around, because I often do that, right? Like you're looking at that, and then I'll just zooming in and being like, "What the heck is this guy doing?" Cause, like you could probably like, have you ever tried to Google Earth for your own place? I bet you could be like, "Yeah, this looks pretty suspicious when I look at my own backyard." Because I mean, the pictures are there. If they know where you live, if like there's any of your neighbors, I can guarantee. Like myself, when I look at neighborhoods, I look at that to be like, okay, there's pools, that's the backyard. How close is it to all that? I mean, I can guarantee you a lot of people have looked at your property and been like, what the heck is this guy doing?
Well, what's funny about that, I actually did Google Earth this a few times, but 2 years ago, we bought those 50 aquaculture tubs, right? And so each one needed about 100 pounds of sand backfilled into them. And I live on the perfect sand. So I had Eddie Soto, who's also a reptile breeder, a friend of mine, lives not far from here, because I'm too old to move that much dirt. So I was like, man, Ed, come out here, we'll pay you. I need you to just dig out a bunch of dirt, and put it in. So it was like 2,500 pounds or some shit. Like it was a lot of sand. So he did, and he didn't do what I told him. I initially I was like, just take a foot off of the top, right? Don't build a giant. So he's doing this for a couple days, and I go out there finally to look, and he dug this massive 3-foot deep pit. Like it's huge. It's probably 20 feet across, 3 feet deep. And I was like, dude, somebody's going to fall in that. I'm going to accidentally ride the lawnmower into there. Anyway, you can see that thing from space. And it's ridiculous, man. On Google Earth, it's like, why does this guy have this giant pit that's clearly been dug? And you can see like the marks where it was wheelbarrowed out of there and over to the rows of enclosures. But my next door neighbor is Dennis Uhrig, he has 5 acres, and he has Russ Gurley told me he has one of the most, I don't know what I'm looking at with turtles, right? With water turtles, like that's never been my thing. So I look at all that stuff. He's got all this cool stuff, but apparently it's like one of the best collections around. I had no idea. He didn't know that I was here. I didn't know that he was here. And we were living next door to each other for about a year. And he does the same thing I do. He let his place all grow up so nobody can see in his place. Well, the neighbor on the other side of me called animal control on me and him one day. And that guy looked at us from Google Earth, saw there was like all this stuff going on in these 2 properties, and he had animal control sent out. So animal control comes out. I happened to be home. She pulled in the yard. She started asking me some questions. I'm like, look, you want to look around? Have at it. We've got permits. I've been doing this forever. So I gave her the full tour. She was here for like 2 hours. She left and she wrote us a glowing report. So I was like, all right, that's cool. Well, Dennis was not so nice. He told her to get the hell out and don't come back and whatever. And he was pissed. So he pulled Freedom of Information and found out that I was a reptile breeder here and that it was this guy next to me that ratted us both out. So he pulled in my yard. He's like, hey, I'm Dennis. He used to be Wayne Hill's partner, the guy that runs the Daytona show. And
Makes sense because Wayne's a big turtle guy
big
too, right?
turtle guy, yeah. So he comes over and he's telling me, he's like, it was this, you know, expletive after expletive about this neighbor. And he's like, that guy, was called animal control on us and what the hell. And so, yeah, that's how I met him. And then I found out that we had like the same customers. They were coming over here and not telling me. And then when they leave here, they would go over there to his place. But they didn't tell either one of us. Like, it was this weird. They were afraid that I'd be pissed if people knew, and he would be pissed if it was this weird thing. So anyway, it's cool though to have somebody like that next door now. Because now if like today we were out at that show, and we had like hurricane force winds. So I called Dennis. I'm like, hey, what's it look like over there? Because we were like 30 minutes away. And he's like, hey, it's ripping the plastic off your enclosure. So he came over here and he fixed it all. When I came home, everything was perfect. And I was like, man, that's awesome. So, and then, we do obviously the same thing for him. So yeah, it was just a weird thing.
So I kind of get that because, like, I look at all the animals I have in my place, and like, you walk into the house, anybody comes in the house, you would never know there's a reptile in the house unless you open one specific door, right? Everything's hidden. The neighbors have no idea, nothing. And for all I know, my neighbor 2 houses down might have 300 snakes, and I just don't know about it, right? Because
Right.
we all hide it. We just don't want trouble from any of the
Right.
neighbors, anything like that. So you just want your house to look like every other house that nobody has any idea it's one of those weird houses that has 200 reptiles in their basement, right? So I've always kept it like this, and I could swear, for all I know, maybe there is some other, outcast that has all these animals in his basement right on my street, but I don't know. I've always wondered, but anyway, mine is completely hidden. Nobody would know. Even when you walk into the house, you would not know. There's no indicators whatsoever that my basement is any different than any other people's houses.
See, because I do stuff outside, I can't do that. So what I've always done, this was the first time I didn't do this. In the last 3 places that I lived, one of the first things I did when we moved in is I went to the neighbors and said, look, this is what we do. We have all this stuff outside. You're more than welcome to come over anytime you want. And if you ever want a pet, you let me know and I'll hook you up. So I've always hooked up and kept the neighbor. And then now they're sort of invested in what you have. And it kind of, as long as you have cool neighbors. And I've been very fortunate that the 3 initial places that I lived, like almost all of them had kids, and my daughter, they were almost always, around my daughter's age or something. So she ended up hanging out with the neighbor kids and stuff like that. So that actually worked out pretty good for me. This time I didn't do that. And that was because when we moved into this property, it was completely hidden. So I'm like, all right, I don't even need to tell anybody. And everybody's on 5 acres out here. And then we actually had a problem. Thankfully, the girl that came out as she was leaving, I'm like, look, am I going to have more problems with this? And she goes, no, you don't have nothing to worry about. She goes, this is just a Karen. And she said, don't even sweat it. Like she was totally cool after I was up. But when she got out of the car, she was covered in tattoos. And I was like, all right, this is my kind of person. So we're good. So I think if I would have gotten, a normie, then I probably would have had a problem. But this animal control, she was cool. So, and she was
That's
digging
always
all the
good.
monitors and stuff. And at the time I had all these this was when I had all the monitors.
I just got to cut you off and tell you that there are a lot of people that keep a lot of reptiles that do not have tattoos.
No, I believe that. I totally believe that.
I've always wanted tattoos. I love tattoos. I do not have a tattoo on my body. And I have a lot of reptiles. I just got to say it.
Yeah, I know, man. No, it's just, it was just, yeah, I lucked out. I mean, honestly, they can come out here anytime they want. We keep this place. This is what we do. So we try to keep everything always, and I always try to exceed whatever the caging expectations are. So if you get a jackass, and they come out and they want to give you a hard time and they look at it, it's kind of hard to find something to bust your chops over. It's like there's nothing running around here, no, We have tokay geckos that are living on. That was part of the reason why I decided to do them again. Because when we moved in here, you could hear them calling all around here. Like not they were I didn't have any at all yet. Like they're in our trees, and you can hear them call. And then I talked to Dennis, and he's like, "Oh yeah, they've been here forever." But this whole county, now that I know, once I found out they were here, like fairly common, I can see where they are. They're hanging out like on telephone poles near the street lights and stuff like that. So it's surprising how much.
Tokays are cool too. Like they've picked up in popularity.
Yeah,
Like working tables with Tyrone. Like he's got a couple like big exos in his shop with tokays that he's kind of raising up to produce. But captive bred tokays sell $250 a piece at shows pretty easily.
exactly. Very very easy to produce. Big demand. Always in demand. There's
But the
bulletproof.
Walcots are so cheap. Like
They are.
Well,
but
but
that's
they're
why I don't
CITES now.
understand.
They are CITES now, so
They're still
it might come in less
well.
numbers.
The last shipment they came in, I mean, they were like, if you looked at the price from the importer, not what the importer sold to the person, they were in the $7 to $12 range.
Yeah, they're.
Like
I
they
was
were,
gonna say they're 11
Yeah.
bucks usually.
it's like that's
But do you
insanely
want the
cheap.
captive bred one that's not gonna hang off your finger as much
Yeah.
as that wild
Captive
caught
bred
one, right?
one.
That's
So it's a lot of the species that I worked on were stuff that were cheaply imported, like captive bred flying geckos. I can't remember the Latin. They're like Tycozoon or something. Um, anyway, you can sell the hell out of those for $100, man, and it's a $6 imported gecko. So
I was going to ask, so since this is your livelihood, usually when you look at a species and you decide, like, I want to breed this in mass, what are you looking for? A cheap import that can resell for a decent value? Like, I don't know, like, what are those key aspects that you look at? And let's say, what are you looking to shift yourself into now?
well, the only things that most reptile species are not worth doing in mass. I mean, it's worth it for most of them if you produce 50 or 100 a year of a given thing. Like that's a reasonable amount to have to sell, and it's pretty easy. And most things you can find, buyers for those, and they're good. The stuff that I would do on a scale though, so I mean, it's so, dude, it's so there's such a big like gulf between commercial. For me, a commercial number of something is 1,000 to 2,000 on average. But for a lot of places, like I can think of 4 companies right now that when they do a scale, it's 50,000 or 100,000. Like I but those are companies that have 100 employees. So when you're talking about those kind of numbers, though, even the 2,000, it needs to be something that is iconic. It's something that a lot of herpers know what it is. Like it's something that they see. Emerald tree boas are iconic. They're something that you theoretically should be able to make 500 of them, 1,000 of them a year, sell them no problem. They probably won't, if you made 1,000 a year, probably won't command the current prices, but they would still be very profitable. I don't ever see that happening. Maybe somebody will do it. But they would only have that market because they're iconic. And it would only be herpers that are buying those. So you're not going to sell those to like, normies. The stuff that we do commercially, like the blue tongues, which again, when I say that though, blue tongues, we maybe produce 300 a year. Like it's relatively nothing. But they actually have an enormous market because normies buy those. And more moms are coming up wanting to buy them for their kids and stuff like that because it's much simpler than a bearded dragon. A lot of people don't want to deal with bugs, and you don't have to feed them bugs. So they have the same thing that crested geckos have. They're just not quite as simple. Crested geckos obviously Rapacean, Pangea, and those diets exist, and you could theoretically just feed those. So they have this like diet. Hey guys, cut it out. Sorry. When a Yorkie and a Bulldog decide they're gonna yell at each other. So what were we talking about before I was rudely interrupted by a 2-pound dog?
Blue tongues and their commercialization.
Oh yeah. So, but those things have commercial viability, and there's probably 20 species in the trade that have that you could do on a scale of 1,000 or more and have a relatively reasonable time. You could get them out, get them. Because I mean, if you produce a lot of people that get into this run into that problem where they produce too much and they don't have an outlet for it. And if you don't have an outlet for it, boy, things go south pretty quick. Now, fortunately for us, I've been in this for 40 years. Heather's been in this for like almost 30 now. So we both have this like massive base of either customers or industry people. So we can pretty much produce whatever we want, and we can get it distributed to the right people. But it takes time to build that up. And so, but it's a whole lot easier if it's something that lends itself to, it's either iconic or lends itself to that sort of commercial viability. So most species though in the trade are not that. So like I'm doing this gecko thing and I'm imposing a hard cap of no more than 3 pairs of a bunch of different species, but I'm doing the tokays, I'm doing 40 pairs. Because 40 pairs of tokays, I'll have no problem selling all the babies at a good price. Make a decent amount of money to be able to keep doing it and to be able to buy more weird geckos that, that most people don't care about, but hardcore herpers do. And I have a steady, we do these shows, I have a steady stream of like hardcore herpers that seek me out. They're like, hey, what do you got? So if I got weird stuff, like just like when I was doing the anoles, I had no issues really. I ran into problems with those when I was trying to do the morphs, and I was trying to make those a commercial thing, but it wasn't going to happen. After 10 or 12 years, I started realizing, yeah, they're a little too, they're just not commercially viable on that scale. They're perfect for, like, herpers love them. Like, they're very well suited for that. If you have like 3 to 5 pairs of those giant anoles, you can sell every baby, no problem. When you have 2,000 square feet of them, it's another story, which is what I ended up with.
Going back to the tokays, actually, do you keep only like 1.5 in a cage, or do you keep multiple males if the cage is big enough?
So the enclosures that I have they're 36 inches tall, 22 inches long, and 17 inches deep.
So one male.
So one pair in each enclosure. So I have 40 of those tanks, so I'm going to run 40 pairs.
You've never considered doing like a 1.2, 1.3?
Oh, you can definitely.
I was going to say, because that would produce tons of eggs continuously, and they're popping out 2 eggs pretty frequently, aren't they? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to think, every 6 weeks? What is it? I'm not quite sure. I remember we would breed tokay geckos accidentally at the zoo I would work with just by keeping 1.4, and the eggs would continuously stick on the walls, and then the babies would then hatch, and then they'd stay with the parents, and then they would, get out of the little mesh holes, and then they would free roam the zoo. Like, that was basically what happened continuously.
So yeah, sort of like that. The reason that I'm doing them in pairs mostly is because if I keep the densities low, and a pair in this size enclosure is a low density. And then they're also every tokay enclosure I take pieces of plywood and then lean them up against each other. So it gives them a lot of space and crevices. And because if you lean the plywood, just the right way, you get a varying gradient of how crevicey, how much of a crevice is there. So little ones can get like way up in there if they want to get away from everybody, and even the adults can't get them, but the adults can be a couple inches down and be in a comfortable place. So the main reason for that though is that so I can just let the babies hatch in there and I don't have to remove anything. And then as I sell them, I can just pull them out of the enclosures, and there's no extra enclosures needed. It's all sort of fire and forget. It's basically bioactive. And then, the only thing I have to do is maintain the glass, which if there's only a pair, so but if I put 3 or 4 in there, you're right. I would get a lot more eggs, a lot more production. But I also am I don't want to make 1,000 tokays. I want to make around 500 baby tokays a year. Captive bred tokays that I can sell retail when we do shows. So we're kind of doing all these imposed caps.
Yeah, but even if you had, let's say you've got right now, you said 40 tokeis, so 20 males, 20 females, you probably could do the same thing with half the cages and put 1.2 in every single one of them. Then you only have 10 cages to clean instead of 20. I don't know. That's just the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that's true too. I just a few years ago when I started doing the giant anoles, like I could do those in groups like that too, but I found that I was just getting way when we actually sat down and figured it out, the production rate was much higher in the ones that were kept in pairs than the ones that were in trios and quads, with the exception of having them in those giant monitor cage. Like I put some of those in those giant monitor enclosures that are they were they're like 4 feet wide, 8 feet tall, and 8 feet long. So these are huge outdoor for a for an 18-inch lizard. They're massive, and I put 1.4 in each one of those. Those were cranking out. But when I had them in the smaller enclosures, like 2x2x4s, the production went down in anything more than a pair. But a pair would fire on like all cylinders, and it was amazing. So I don't know. I mean, again, like you said, I think you could probably do a trio with no problem at all in my enclosures, and have less tanks to clean. But I really don't have anything else to put in those tanks anyway. So it's like, and I kind of want to walk into this room and have all the tanks full of something, with something going on. So it's actually less cleaning too when you have them in those lower densities like that, and especially when they have all those boards and there's all these insects in there to eat any of the feces that they can get to. So the only stuff that I really got to worry about is if they defecate on the glass, which surprisingly, when they have all those boards in there, they don't really do that. Like there's very little issues with the glass at all. It's pretty damn clean. I was surprised. I thought the times I've done them,
that makes sense.
Yeah, they're not using
right
it.
with all that surface area, right? Instead of being on the glass, because you just got a little bit of cork or something. Like you got that sheet that they can just kind of sit on.
Yeah, and every enclosure.
I'm sure they get pretty dirty, but
yeah. Well, every enclosure has between 4 and 6 sheets in it. So it's like multiple, because it's funny. I kind of took that from when I was a kid. I used to catch tokies in Miami all the time. And anytime you found boards leaning up against walls and you pulled those boards back, they almost always had tokeis in them. And one particular day I found a whole big pile of these 4x4 boards leaning up against this wall in between two buildings. And I pulled the first one back, and there were like 4 tokeis under it, and I caught them. And then the next one, there were more tokeis, and I must have pulled like 25 tokeis out of this stack of boards along this wall, and I never forgot it. And it always stuck with me. And so, and there was one of the boards was just full of eggs, so it was that was clearly something that they preferred. They had this whole city, and all these buildings and trees all around it, but they were in this board pile. So
that's pretty cool. I'm definitely gonna tell Tyrone about that because he has like three big exos with he does the pair too, just one pair in each one. So he just has a cork set up in there, but you never know. Like I think that plywood idea is actually not a bad idea either.
Yeah, a lot of people. Cork looks better. Plywood is just, it's like, why do you have a stack of plywood in that tank over there? And then, you see what it does though. Like I said, that's kind of a Langerwerf thing, right? It's like finding something that works, but sheets of plywood are a lot cheaper than big sheets of cork.
Oh yeah.
Cork. I've got a ton of it out there because we buy it too, from wholesale, and even wholesale, it's like stupidly expensive. A lot of that's shipping, because shipping, obviously, they're bulky and it's a pain in the ass to ship it. But yeah.
Do you have a heart out tonight, or could we maybe touch on the frog stuff
good.
before?
Whatever, man.
What about you, Dom? Are you good to if we maybe touch on the raising of some frogs and then
I was about to ask you, why don't you pick your last subject and all that, or if you want to keep chatting, I might bow out at some point. You can keep going if you want to keep going too. That's another option.
Okay. Well, let's see how long it takes us to talk about raising tadpoles into froglets and stuff like that.
Yeah, and look, if I'm sticking on a subject too long, dude, just tell me to shut the hell up and
No,
I'll
it's
switch.
interesting, man.
Oh, it's all good.
I would never shut you up.
I'm I'm definitely gonna re-listen to this one in the future.
Frogs, huh? Um,
So maybe with like the red eyes, because like I'm sure you can touch on the other ones, but maybe let's look at like you do the red eyes, like how are you kind of setting up the groups and then and whatnot. Maybe take us through the basics of breeding and raising red eye tree frogs.
yeah, so for me, what I've always done with the red eyes, it's actually pretty simple. I generally, I have a 2 by 2 by 4 foot outdoor enclosure. And then when I just if I decide I need to do them, I'll usually go and buy somewhere between 10 and 20 pairs of imports, or at least this is what I used to. I haven't done red eyes in a few years because I did the whites the last couple times. Um, but yeah, I would just go buy between 10 and 20 pairs. And then I would take two very, very large hanging pothos plants, ones that have lots of stringers running down with leaves, and then I would hang them on a bar at the top of that enclosure so they hung down. At the bottom of the cage, I put a cat litter pan or something similar with about, a couple inches of water. And that's pretty much it. I put them in a place where they get somewhat shaded but still get a little bit of sunlight, but they'll when it rains they'll get pelted pretty good. And then every time it rains, I would just go out there and in the morning and clip the leaves that had, egg pods stuck to them. And then I tape it onto the side. I bring them in the house, tape the leaf to the side of like a critter keeper that has a couple inches of water, and put it in my air conditioned house on the floor, which is generally kept around 78 degrees. And then I'll usually just line the hallway with those. And then I wait till I find tadpoles in the thing, and then I take the tadpoles and I dump them into a very large outdoor cattle trough. Like it's like an 8 foot wide round cattle trough that's full of anacris and water plants. And I would just put them in there. And the water in there is probably 18 inches deep or so. Like it's very deep, and it's probably too deep for most tadpoles, but there was so much anacris in it that essentially created like a false floor kind of situation where they had a couple inches at the top, and the tadpoles really didn't sink to the bottom. They could stop so they had plenty of space. And that was pretty much it, man. And then this cattle trough that I use, the reason I use it is it has a lip, right? So when the baby froglets come out, they climb up and they go right into the lip, and then they can just get them out of the lip, and you can find them all. It's super easy. That's pretty much how I always did it, and I could produce a few thousand if I needed to or more. Um, Very simple, but again, I'm in Florida, and the last time I did that,
And what are the tadpoles mainly feeding on? Are they more of like an algae, or are they more of like a protein based
I mean,
tadpole?
in the pond that I put them in, that cattle trough thing, there it is. I mean, I know they're eating. God knows what they're eating. As far as it's a fully bioactive, like it's a legit, pond essentially. But then I supplement feed with whatever a good quality of fish flake food. I would normally have run two or three different types, and then like one day they would get like a veggie cichlid diet, and then one day they would get like just tetramen or whatever, standard tropical fish flakes. So I would just kind of vary that out. The whites I do a little different. I give them more of a variety of stuff. Um, I've given them everything from tube effects and bloodworms, and I don't know how much that helps or hinders, but um, actually, Eddie Soto turned me on to the veggie cichlid food, a vegetarian version, and that actually seemed to be the best. Like it grew the white's tadpole super fast. Like they were out of the water in a couple weeks, and it was crazy. So I really like that. Plus, they eat a lot of it. Um,
And the red eyes, so whites can be kind of like a few weeks to morph out, or the red eyes taking a little longer or a little less.
See, because of the way I do this, I can't really. I never really bothered to even. It's for me, like I said, I'm not a serious frog guy. I'm a guy who uses frogs to kind of pad my lizard projects and keep going. So I only use a couple species. And I mean, if I was going to do frogs seriously, I do mossies. I love those. But
Oh
the
yeah,
fact that
they're cool.
yeah, but the fact that they got to be so cold, the cold and all that kind of. If I lived where you guys though, I'd have a building full of those. That would probably be the one thing that I would do commercially. Um, Mossies are awesome.
Yeah, I think I knew some people that were wanting to breed them, but it was like hard to find females or something. Like everybody has males, but you can't find any females or something like that.
2 years ago, I bought 40 of them, and every one of them was a male.
Hmm.
And I was like, all right, that's it. I'm not doing this again. Um, but you can get females. They just have the females. From what I understand, you can't get female. They're temperature sexed, and only way to get females is to have them in, come out of like 50-degree water, 55-degree water. Which, yeah, I could use water chillers and stuff like that here, but I kind of like to stay within, you know, stuff that can survive here no matter what kind of thing. Like if we have, I mean, I live in a place, particularly the last few years, that can get hit by Category 5 hurricanes, which can knock out your power for up to 6 months if you're one of the unfortunate ones to score a direct hit. So, I mean, that's things like that are things that we think about. Like what happens if, we get nailed by something like that? We don't have power for 4 or 5 months or even a month. Like it's miserable. I've been through it a few times. It's dude, a week is maddening to not have power. So these people, that are in spots where the entire infrastructure has been destroyed. And it's happening a lot now. Um so that yeah, so stuff like that we consider. So like, oh, what if that does happen? Can this animal survive outside without anything? You know, and so that's kind of why we stay away from things like the crested geckos and stuff like that.
Yeah. Once the red eyes or the whites get out of the water, are they? How long are you raising them before they're kind of at a stable, more sellable size?
That's usually about 6 weeks. It can be up to I guess up to 8 weeks or so. By then it just depends. Some spawns come out bigger or grow faster. Some are a little smaller. I've never really thought about it too much as to what exactly. There's probably water temperature differences that cause that, or a variety of things. Um, with the red eyes, I really did them in kind of a hands-off way. So they would come out of this big pond, and then I would pull them, and then I would put them all into this massive. It was an 8x8 by 3 foot tall, essentially tub with a screen lid that was full of pothos. Like the pothos had fully grown over this thing, so there were thousands of leaves for these. So I could have a couple thousand red eyes in there, and you couldn't even tell. And then when I would get an order for like 100 of them, I'd go out there and flip the leaves over and look for ones that were big, and I just pull them like that. I would just dump boxes of crickets in there, like once or twice a week, and um, yeah, it was very hands off, very and it worked really well though. I mean, it does work well. You can definitely do. There are species that you can do like that, like have them in larger, but there's also downsides. I mean, you're putting baby frogs and stuff like that. You got to have gaskets around all the 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 doors and everything because they can get out of the smallest you know uh, cracks or crevices. So you got to fix that, and it's harder in a bigger enclosure. You never really know exactly how many are in there. It's not like you'd have to tear the whole thing apart. It's just so there's downsides to it, but um, like I said, it was never something I ever did seriously because there are plenty of frog guys out there that really that's their thing and they're really good at it. And for
Yeah.
me, for
You
me,
just even outside of the U.S., you just don't see like you see whites, right? But you never really see red eyes being done. Like I think the only red eyes we get are probably all wild caught still. Maybe I could be wrong. There might be one guy in Europe or somebody who's shipping some stuff over, because I know there are some uh, frog guys and toad guys. Like, was it Nelson's brought in? I think Japanese toads, some morph like albino European firebelly stuff,
Yeah.
and some more odds and ends of like some of that weird funky. I know it was. I think there. I think it might be wild caught, but you got the smooth sided toads
Yeah,
and whatnot. Those things are cool.
they are cool. Yeah.
Greg and Ty have some that are like this big.
Yep.
They're pretty neat.
Yeah. No,
I think they're going to try to water chamber them this spring and see what happens.
all that stuff, man. I mean, Bob Mayu at Sandfire, he pretty much stopped doing bearded dragons just to really focus on frogs, and he was doing really well. I mean, it's the frogs are fun. It's just it just was ended up never like I really I like shit that lives in trees. I like bigger things, I like chondros. I like a lot of the arboreal monitor. The lace monitor was the pinnacle for me of things to own, and I finally got them. Um, I like stuff like that. I like the bigger colubrids. Um, I guess I'm still stuck in that mode where I've always been, but
Yeah.
all the boas are interesting. I have pythons and
I remember, was it one show a couple of years ago? This will be like my last question.
no,
Sorry, Dom. uh, the so like you found, was it there was a pine, like you have pine snakes on your property too, or
yep,
possibly,
yeah,
right? You found one that was out
deals.
like the FedEx guy hit it and it was like 105 degrees on the road or something.
Yep. Did I post that on Facebook or something?
No, you just mentioned it, and
Yeah,
maybe one of the first ones you did with Roy and Phil. Because
yeah,
I found that interesting because I keep Kentucky pines and I love pine snakes
I do too,
because they're freaking awesome, man. Because
dude.
like you hear how people keep them, right? They're like, oh, you just keep them 75 in a V70 tub, but like when you think of their biology is more like an eastern indigo or more like a eastern diamondback, where yeah, they live in a burrow and probably their main body temperature is in the mid 70s, but they still come out and bask, right? They're like a basking animal when you really think about it.
So I own 10 acres in a place called Lake Placid, Florida, which is about 2 hours south of here, and it's up in the Sandhills in Florida. And on that property, that's where I found the Florida pine. We find a lot of Florida pines, and it's also full of indigos. It has about 50 to 60 gopher tortoises that live on it, so it's got a ton of burrows. And I mean, dude, I was digging a hole one day and I dropped the shovel to walk back to the house because I had a phone call. And I turned around after I'd walked about 50 feet and I looked back at the shovel. And the shovel, there was another shovel sitting next to it, something that looked like a shovel handle. I started to walk back to it. It was a giant indigo. And this was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on like a 90-degree day. So it was out cruising. And the Florida pines, you never see them except in the spring and summer. And it's always on hot days in the afternoon. Actually, the FedEx guys ran over a couple of them because I get deliveries every day. And I was living on this tiny little dirt road. That property's on a little dirt road. And I kept finding dead ones on the road after the FedEx guy came through. And he didn't even realize he was running these over because the road is completely pocked with deep potholes. So they would be laying, I guess, basking in the potholes, and they were accidentally running them over. But I found them out there when I'd be out there mowing that property. I'd find them just cruising, like they're amazing and they're big. That's a big pine snake. And I always had a Pituophis thing, man. Back in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, I had 50, 60 of them. I had black pines and Ruthveni and all the different gophers and the morphs and stuff, the Applegate stuff, and love that stuff, man. Absolutely.
And you kept those outside?
No, no.
No.
Back then I was living in a tiny little house in the middle of Miami, so it was all basically I was living.
That must have smelled really nice.
Dude, that was one of the reasons that I finally said fuck it and got rid of them because they constantly having to clean those. But yeah, I was
Yeah.
living in a
Yeah, that
675 square foot house on a major freeway, like right on the freeway, and we lived in the back bedroom, and every other room in the house, including the kitchen, was stacked with snakes, and that was where I did all my initial stuff.
Oh yeah,
And the whole
yeah,
outside was full of lizards. So yeah, it was a
yeah. The
bad neighborhood
pines,
too.
yeah, yeah. The pines aren't that bad, I find. But like it's like when the mice, my one of my big female takes a dump,
Yeah, it's
it's like
bad.
okay,
And they
it's
smear
like
it all
okay, you
over.
gotta
Mm.
clean that up right. Well, if you catch it wet just in time, you can just pull that sucker out. But yeah, no, when you're raising up the juveniles and it's like okay, it's all good for like,
Yep.
and then like every once a week or 2 weeks they actually poop, and it's like okay, okay, let's just take everything out and re clean this tub here.
I could see
Yep.
keeping pits outside. You'd have kind of a handle on that situation, though, right? It would kind of
Oh
remove
yeah.
that problem.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you'd still need to spot clean, but yeah, it would be. I think they would actually thrive even better because they seem to like ventilation. Like
Hmm.
based off of how what was it? Somebody, I think it was Dusty Rhodes' book, and ventilation being key with subox. I've kind of taken that because I keep subox too,
That's
and
another
I've
one.
done that with both the pines and the subox. With like the PVC cages I got, I just drilled a ton of holes in the subox cages just to like give them as much ventilation as possible while giving them more space than just like a V70 tub. So keep them in a 4x2x1 cage
Yeah.
to like hopefully mitigate that. And then the pines, right? You give them the 6 foot cages with like was it? It's I think it's might be the soffit venting that you can get. I use that as like the vent in the side just so it's not as rough as like a normal like HVAC vent kind of thing.
Yeah, the screen vents and stuff. Yeah, well, I use a lot of
Yeah.
those pop-in vents now too. Rather than drilling them out, I'll just use different ones. And depending on what, like ventilation is another big problem with a lot of the stuff that we have. I think it's way more important than we tend to think because a lot of species that we keep, we can get away without the really good ventilation. But
Yeah. It's
you
like
work,
thinking about like that long term like was it I think in Dusty's book it talks about one suboc living 27 years at the Dallas Zoo, but like it's literally in like a big exhibit and the whole top is just open like mesh, right? So it has that ton like endless amount of ventilation
yeah,
to keep it nice and healthy while like yeah, colubrid or ball python might live 20 years in a bin. Well, maybe if you keep it a different way, it'll live 60 years kind of
yeah.
thing, right? So there's all that like stuff that makes you think like what could we do better even if right like with the aspen and cocoa as substrates mainly, it's
Hmm.
like well the dust from the shavings is like bad, but then so like choosing that over the cocoa which still dries out and becomes dusty versus a
Yeah,
paper product which could be dusty too. Like obviously straight paper is not really that dusty, but like it's like well these are all dusty, these all have this
yeah,
potential and probably isn't good for them to be breathing it, but it's like how do we mitigate that, right? That's just stuff I've thought about.
yeah. I mean, dude, that's one of the reasons we use for most of the things that we have. We use the stuff from our own property. We use the sand here when we need substrate. I have most of this 5 acres is covered in oak trees, so I have thick layers of oak leaves everywhere. So a lot of times I'll just use that. The only reason we use hay, honestly, is because it's time effective, as opposed to trying to rake up enough leaves for 144 enclosures and constantly be refilling them. I mean, you're talking about a fairly substantial, constant job. Whereas the hay, I can just get a bale for $12 or whatever, and put it, get it in the to all of them. Plus,
As I
but
say,
plus
it's
hay
cheap
is
to get a
more.
large amount.
Yeah, exactly, and it's relatively natural. I mean, so. And it's not going to be dusty like that. And anything that's in bags, like that's one of the reasons I stopped using
Yeah,
mulch. Right, mulch is super dusty too, and it has all these.
but you're also outside too, so like the dust will dissipate a lot
Right, and
better
the rain will take
over,
care of
and
a
and you
lot.
get the rain.
Yeah,
Us keeping in tight enclosures, like I think Dom, you mostly keep your stuff on either mulch or paper. Like
I do
you're probably
paper
not
or
as dusty.
cypress
Okay.
mulch, but cypress mulch is the one of the mulch that I find is it's not dusty. It's not as bad as the other ones.
really. Yeah,
Yeah,
the one
well,
you guys must have a good one because what we get down here that's quote cypress mulch. It's not really cypress. It's like a mix of all this, but whatever they mix in the one we get, is like so dusty, man. It's unreal.
Yeah,
Like
you
it's
need to
terrible.
get the pure cypress mulch. Like it needs to
That's
be
probably
pure and
why.
only, but it's expensive, right? But I find it nice.
Yeah, somebody was telling me that you can get a pure brand, but it's hard to get and it's like way more expensive.
It sucks. It's really hard to find. There's only like one or two places in all of Canada that have it, and you really need to know where it is, and everybody
Yeah,
flocks to that one place for it.
no shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
down here, dude, I don't know that I could even get it. And we're in Cypress country, so I don't, every time I go to Home Depot, they've got like 10 different bags of cypress mulch and it's always the same. It's a blend of whatever's in there. But yeah, I was having a lot of problems with mulch, so I kind of have been phasing it out and going just back to just digging the dirt up and then using the hay and stuff. But yeah, I mean I feel like we don't know a lot about all this stuff. I think we have a long way to go. I look at a lot of the fish guys, and the fish stuff, and they're way beyond us. But they're actually an older industry too, an older
Yeah.
hobby. They have a lot more. They've had a lot more of a concerted effort pushing it forward.
Oh yeah.
So we
Yeah,
have
their
that now.
systems are next level. Like a lot of fish farms,
Yeah,
right? Like we think of Indonesian reptile farms. Well, fish farms are everywhere, right? There's saltwater and there's freshwater. There's more fresh than salt. But
yeah,
now, like, there's still lots of saltwater farms, even like in situ with coral and that now. Like reef keepers make a lot of money. Like
I
if you're
know.
really good at growing coral, like you could even out of a couple 100 gallons worth of saltwater, you can make your yearly wage with just that
Yeah,
kind of thing if you know the right people.
yeah, I know. I know a bunch of those. I like I said, I these days I tend to take more new ideas from watching the fish guys and talking to them than I do from the reptile people because we've been kind of stuck in this like I feel like we've been in a rut for about 10 years where we really haven't made much advances. There's been some, but like we
Yeah.
made a lot of advances pretty quick and then we kind of petered out. We're just waiting. It's really going to take the newer generations to come in and just push again, like new ideas, new ways of looking at it.
Oh yeah. I like how. Have you ever watched the aquarium co-op stuff and what
Yes,
Corey's doing?
yes,
I like he created like just with his YouTube and just being himself. He created like I think he created just like that whole rejuvenation. Like the fish hobby kind of sucks too. Like
yeah,
being in the fish hobby, like a lot of it's like worse than the reptiles and aspects of people. Well, why is this fish this much? Or I just want one of each kind of thing instead of like, well, you should just have a tank of 400 of these because it looks way
right,
cooler, right? So
yep,
like, I think the way he is doing his whole thing and making a brand off of his YouTube channel almost like, but in a positive, totally positive network. Like he's
I
a
know,
totally positive guy. There's no like garbage with it, like the reptile people. Like there would be something wrong where oh no he's backstabbing somebody here. It's like oh no he's just like actually like honest and actually pays his people right too. Like it's just so cool how he's actually able to do something right in a hobby that does like fish can have their bad parts of it too, but he himself has kind of created that whole industry I want to feel and created a brand as well.
yeah. There's a kid down in Australia. The name of the channel is Keeping Fish Simple. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
That,
Oh,
that's another one.
it'd be. I want to get Eric. He did that awesome interview with Eric and Eric Bodrock and whatnot. That was really cool. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
he's doing some cool stuff too.
yep. That's another one I watch. I've watched every one of his. Him and Corey are like my two favorites of that group. There's a few other ones too, but yeah, I always try to look into other like I've looked at agriculture. I mean, I've looked at aviculture plenty of times in the past. I've taken some ideas from those guys. I know a bunch of those bird guys that have like huge collections, so I'll hit. They have different ways of looking at it too, and so you can really kind of a lot of it ports over to reptiles pretty well with little modifications, and I don't know. I'm always looking for, dude. I'm never gonna sit in one
Oh
place.
yeah,
I
it'd
just
be cool. We should get Phil to have on some fish people. I think Phil with like Phil
yeah.
Lees with some like interesting fish people that could create some interesting conversations because
I just
I love
talked.
how that guy thinks.
Yeah, I just talked to him the other day. I forget what. He called me about something. Yeah, Phil's a good one, man. Him and Roy really. I like Project Herpetoculture. I thought that was a really interesting show, and
Oh yeah.
he had different. They kind of took it in different directions. Um, yeah, I mean, dude, there's a
Yeah,
ton.
we had Phil on a couple months ago now. Yeah, he was
Oh, really?
fantastic. We had
Yeah.
the Ipers on twice. Like I feel like every time we have a show, like the guests are just fantastic, and you always want to have the guest on again. Like it's like, oh well, we could talk another 3 hours about
Right.
400
100%.
other things, right?
Yeah, there's a ton
It's
of
just
stuff. Like we didn't touch on a lot of stuff tonight, and I'm honest, man. I'm not on my game. I'm tired. It's been a long weekend and show, and dealing with this weather and everything. I'm probably rambling, but yeah, I mean,
that's all good. Yeah, I think it's been fantastic.
all right, well,
No, I would agree. It's been great. I mean, it's very entertaining. I love it. It's great information. I can guarantee people will love the show. I bet you it's going to be one of our top shows. I have zero doubt about it.
Yeah, we'll see if he can beat Nick Mutton.
but, you know,
Goddamn Mike.
Mr. Northwest Python guy. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we still need to try to get Ryan on. I need to lock him down. He's
Oh,
interested in coming on. It's just I can't lock him down for a show
oh,
yet.
Ryan Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good one. He's done a lot of amazing stuff. All those guys, dude. We have the reptile industry. We are lucky. We all have tons of. There's a lot of people that have interesting stuff to say. Um, so yeah, and sounds like you're hitting them, all of them. So
Yeah, we're trying to get the more interesting people on there.
how
Michael, do
long
you
have
want
you
to
guys been doing this?
half a year? Well, the podcast.
Yeah, we started in
Yeah, yeah.
podcast for about since the beginning of July.
No
So
shit.
this is episode 30. We haven't missed a week yet, although I've missed a couple weeks. But Dom kept it going while I went to a bunch of reptile shows every weekend in a row.
You did well. So, Mike, I wanted to ask you: do you want to keep going? Because I got to work in 5 hours, so I need to get some
I
sleep.
think Ron's getting. I think we're all kind of getting tired because tomorrow's Monday.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll cap it here and have him back on for another
Yeah.
for
Listen,
another conversation.
anytime you guys hit me up, I'll come back. Not a problem. So
Amazing.
Awesome.
yeah. Sorry it took this long because I was supposed to do the last one, but I got sick and
Oh, it's
All
all
good,
We
man.
had William Philippek fill in. He was fantastic as well.
Oh,
That
yeah.
one went like
Dude,
3 hours and 20 minutes.
he's awesome too, man. Yeah.
Ron, you want to put any of your information out there? Any way for anybody to get a hold of you, chat with you?
Right now I have all my personal social media shut off because I was tired
Just
of
talk
all
to
of it.
Heather.
Yeah, Heather is. I mean, I will probably eventually turn it back on, but yeah, the best way is get a hold of Heather at fairytaledragons.com or I'm sorry, Fairytale Dragons on Instagram and Facebook, and it's fairytale with a Tail, not Tale. That's a different. Anyway, that's who we are. We're Fairytale Dragons, and she keeps up with all that, and whereas I will throw my phone away for a week at a time and not even look at it, she stays on it and. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. Been a hardcore gamer forever, and I adopted all this crap in the beginning, and it kind of, especially right now with the way the U.S. is, it's not a fun time to be here. So I'm trying to not have to get pissed off all the time. So I'm leaving it alone. I shut it all off. Just like I'm tired of all of you. I'm out.
That's pretty fair.
Not you guys. You know what I mean? Just all the hateful stuff. So yeah, Fairy Tale Dragons on Instagram and Facebook is the way.
Perfect. Well, for Michael Gillian on Facebook, myself, Dominic Catwino on Facebook. For the podcasts, it would be Reptile Rejects on Instagram, which you'll be contacting Mike. Reptile Rejects on any podcasts, Spotify, Apple, pretty much anywhere you get your things, whether it be I know it's on Google and it's on a couple of other places. And for YouTube, please press the little subscribe button. Come join us. And lastly, Ron, I really, really appreciate you coming on. That was amazing. Great show. Really, really loved having you on. Really, really interesting shit. And thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys having me on, man. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, have a good night. Have a good night, Mike.
Yeah, you